I've been collecting paper crafting ideas for years, and today I'm sharing all of them with you in one place. We're talking over 25 projects, everything from making your own rice paper, leather paper, to transfers, washi tape, vintage tintype photos, shaving cream art, and so much more. And the best part, almost everything I'm going to show you today uses supplies you probably already have in your craft room. So grab a coffee or a tea, get comfortable, and let's dive in because this one is going to keep you busy for a while. Need for this project are some toilet paper. I like to use some school glue. You can also use Mod Podge and a little squirt bottle. I've just got some water in the squirt bottle and I'm just adding a little bit of glue. You don't need very much. I kind of just eyeball it, or you can use Mod Podge. It just helps keep all of the toilet paper together when we start doing our embossing technique. I have two techniques to create beautiful embossed paper, so make sure you stick through to the end. I'll show you the second process later on. The first one, I've got a stamp out of my stash and I've got a piece of toilet paper. I've laid it on top of that stamp, sprayed it with that solution, and I've got a stencil brush and I'm just pushing it into that stencil. You want to be really careful because you don't want to rip that toilet paper, but we want to work it into all the little nooks and grooves of the stamp. Now I'm going to just layer up my toilet paper. You can use anywhere between 4 and 8 sheets of toilet paper, depending on how thick and how many plies your toilet paper is. This toilet paper is 2 ply, so I'm going to apply 8 sheets of it. Take your time in between each sheet, spraying it really thoroughly and then pressing it right in. You want a nice compact pressed piece of toilet paper on that stamp. And I'm going to show you with another floral stamp that I have the same process. I have this beautiful big stamp of old antique writing. I'm going to show you how you can do it on this bigger stamp with more than one piece of toilet paper on it at once. Just kind of tear it up so it covers the whole stamp, and then go through and pat it all in with that stencil brush and make sure you get any air bubbles or any wrinkles out. Take your time, spray with that glue and water mixture in between each one, and I'm going to put the 8 sheets on that one as well. Now we have to let them set aside and I'm going to let them dry overnight. Now I'm going to show you the second technique. You're just going to stack up your pieces of toilet paper. I'm going to use 8 pieces, spraying in between. I don't own an embossing machine or I don't have any plates, but I still love the look of these in my projects. So this is a really affordable way to get this type of paper. Now, once I had those 8 stacks of toilet paper put together, I got out my stencils and I chose this stencil and I'm just using my rolling pin and rolling that stencil into that wet toilet paper, and it's embossing. It's pressing that pattern into the toilet paper. We're going to set it aside and let it dry completely. I find that it takes overnight to dry these. I love to go through my house and find things that will create texture on these pieces of toilet paper that we're turning into embossed paper. This is shelf liner and it has a beautiful grid pattern in it. And when you roll it into that toilet paper, look at the pattern. Now, some of these I have put ink on before, sepia ink and black ink, so when I'm introducing it into the water, it's transferring onto the toilet paper, but that's okay because you can always paint your projects after or ink them even more. These are great to incorporate into junk journaling, scrapbooking, mixed media projects. You can make greeting cards. So many possibilities with this, and you don't need to spend a lot of money on fancy machines to do it. I had this roller stamp that has beautiful little circles on it. It still had some ink on it from my latch project, so when I rolled it on, it transferred onto that toilet paper, but I like the look. It kind of gives it that aged vintage look. What about a potato masher? Gives a beautiful circle pattern on your paper. Now I've seen other crafters use this same technique, but they didn't add glue or Mod Podge. And you can definitely try that, but I do have best results when I put a little bit of glue or a little bit of Mod Podge into that water. That way when it dries all of the paper together and it doesn't like to pull off the layers. Got any fancy doilies? Look at how beautiful this is. Now here's a little twist. I love putting a little bit of food coloring in my water and glue mixture. Don't need very much, and you can spray it in between each layer of toilet paper, and then you're going to have a colored embossed piece of paper when you're all finished, and these are gorgeous. You can also just use stamps and stamp into your layers of toilet paper, pressing them down firmly so you can get a really good imprint, and then set it aside and let it dry overnight. I'm on a roll now. I'm looking through my house for anything that has texture. I had this vase. I rolled it into some. Look at this pattern. Beautiful also. A meat tenderizer. Pressing it into that 8 plies of toilet paper. Gorgeous. I had this roller stamp with a little bit of ink left on it from my last project, but look how it transferred. It's beautiful. Okay, now I'm going to show you all these embossed toilet paper pieces. It's 24 hours later, and I'm going to show you how they have all dried and what I'm going to do with them. This one is really beautiful, and it's so crisp and clean. This is the one that I punched into the stamp, and I'm just trimming around the edges. It had a little bit of black ink from my last project, but that's okay. We can just ink the whole thing. Look how crisp this is. I'm going to cut around the flower, and because there's a little bit of glue incorporated into the toilet paper, it's all stuck together. It will not come apart. This is the large stamp of all the letters, and look at how it transferred. Beautiful. These are going to be wonderful in my junk journaling projects. I'm going to take some of my ink and just ink over those letters and words. Makes everything pop. Looks like an old vintage letter. And here is all of my papers that I stamped into or rolled, or things from around my house. So many possibilities. It's just something that you can experiment with. I have this tag punch, and I love making tags with it. I'm going to use one of those textured embossed pieces of toilet paper and turn it into a tag. Just cut a little hole in the top, add a little bit of ribbon. These are beautiful to add to a gift, or you can add them in your junk journaling or your mixed media projects. And just having that texture in it, it's beautiful. I love DIYing my own cards and envelopes. I have a full tutorial on how to make envelopes. I'll put the link down below in the description. You can check that out. But I'm taking one of my food color dyed embossed pieces of toilet paper, and I'm going to add it to the front of this greeting card with some glue stick. And I love rounding the corners to finish off these cards and envelopes. Just kind of gives it a little bit of a finishing touch, and it looks more professional. Great little punch. I'll put the link to that down below in the description. And we've created a beautiful greeting card to give to a friend. Today I'm going to show you a transfer method using sandwich bags or freezer bags. When you're buying them, make sure you have the type that don't have the label on them. I've done photo and graphic transfers with packing tape, with Mod Podge, with polyacrylic. There's so many different methods, but for some reason, this came into my mind the other day. How about we give this a try and see if we can do a graphic transfer with a plastic baggie? Did some testing. You will not believe the results. You're going to need a towel to protect your table and parchment paper. The first transfer that we're going to do is with this graphic. I designed this. It's in my Etsy store if you want to grab it and try this project out for yourself when you've finished watching this video. And we're going to use the big sandwich bag or the freezer bag. You want to cut off the top zippy part. We don't need that for the transfer. And then we're going to cut the bag open so it's one big sheet of plastic. Now we're going to cut the plastic so it's just a little bit bigger than that sheet of paper. Now this technique will only work with a laser jet printer. It will not work with an inkjet printer. So if you don't have a laser jet printer, you can always go to your local Staples or stationery store and have them do copies for you. We've got our piece of parchment paper, our printed laser jet printer, and I'm laying the plastic right on top of that with plastic hanging off both ends. And then we're going to put the parchment paper on top. And then we're going to iron it. I just have a craft iron in my craft room. That's all I use it for. I have it on the highest setting, and you don't want any steam. And you just want to take your time and just melt that plastic into that piece of paper. It'll take a few passes to get it completely melted. You want to make sure that it's adhered really well on the ends and in the corners. I've let it cool down, and we're going to peel away the parchment paper, and we have our graphics covered with the plastic baggie. Now I don't find one layer of the plastic is enough, so I always like to put on a second layer. I've cut that baggie in half, so we're going to use that other half to put on another layer on top of the graphics. It's all cooled down. We're going to pull away the parchment paper. And we have 2 layers of melted sandwich bags or freezer bags on our graphics. Now I'm going to cut out each of the graphics. Now you want to make sure that you have it adhered really well and double check it. As I was trimming these, I noticed that this was not sealed very well. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to iron it again and then double check and make sure that it's all sealed properly, because if it isn't, we won't get a proper transfer. I've got them all cut out. Now they do have a tendency to roll up. That's not a problem. It's not going to affect when we're all finished with it. So the next thing we want to do is we want to have a dish of warm water. We're just going to set it in the water and just leave it for about 30 seconds. It's been 30 seconds and the paper has really gotten soaked, and we're just going to just rub the paper off the back. You want to go really slow. You don't want to go too hard, and the paper will just roll up underneath your fingers and leave the graphic on that sandwich bag. Just go really slow. If you go too fast, you're going to rub off that transfer. So just take your time. And I have the paper rubbed off, and you can see how it's transparent. And I'm going to trim around the edges to make it look nice and neat. But when you put it on, I've got a coffee stained map. You can see the map through it. So many possibilities with this. And I also like this technique also as an alternative to the packing tape transfer, because the packing tape transfer is really glossy, where this has a bit more of a matte finish to it. And some of your projects, you might not want that glossy finish, so this will replace the packing tape. And it is so cool and so magical. I'm gonna finish off the other ones from that sheet, show you what they look like. I've got all the paper off. Now, this does leave a bit of a haze. As you can see, it's not going to be completely transparent, but it's still really cool. It's flexible, you can't rip it, it's very durable, perfect for junk journaling, scrapbooking, any type of DIY project. And what I like to do with it now is I'll use my glue stick, just put some glue on the back of it, and you can glue it onto your project. I've got my map here, and you can just lay it wherever you want and glue it down. Next, I'm going to show you how you can do it with a page out of an old book. This book was falling apart. I've been using it for my crafting, and I've just ripped out one of the sheets, and we're going to use this sandwich bag. We're going to put down our parchment paper. I've got my little piece from the book. I've cut the top off the sandwich bag. We now have 2 layers here. When you're using the thicker, the freezer bags, they're thicker, and these ones are thinner. So you can iron these 2 together. The thicker ones I like to do in 2 steps. Do the first layer and then the second layer. We're going to cut this down a little bit so it's not so big, and then we'll be ready to iron it together. We're going to put the top layer of the parchment paper on top, get our iron that's on the highest setting with no steam, and then melt that plastic right into that page from that book. We've got our little dish of water and our paper that's got the plastic on the top. Set it in there and let it sit for about 30 seconds. And we're ready to rub off the back. Now this page had words on the front and the back, so this is just going to rub off the words from the back, and we're going to be left with the words on the front. This will also work with magazines. It will work on scrapbooking paper, napkins. You just have to experiment and just try different things and see what works. And the book page is all finished, and you can see how it's transparent on top of that scrapbooking paper. Now, where there was a few holes in it, probably where the plastic kind of melted away. That's why it's so important to have 2 layers, because it's just not thick enough. This one probably could have almost had 3 layers of plastic, but it still kind of gives it character, and I love it. I printed this photo off of the Graphic Fairy on my LaserJet printer, and I'm going to show you how it's going to transfer with a sandwich bag. And I have this one all done. You can see it's a little bit hazy. It's hard to kind of rub off all of it. And when I put it down on some brown tissue paper, how beautiful is that? I'm also going to show you how it will work on a piece of scrapbooking paper. I had some of the freezer bag left over, and that's what I'm going to use for this one. So I'm going to put on this layer, and then we'll put on the second layer. And I have the scrapbook paper all done also. You can see how it's kind of transparent, the pattern of the paper. And look when you put it on some glass. You could make a big sheet of this with a freezer bag, wrap it on a glass bottle, put a candle in it, it'd be just gorgeous. So there's another technique to add into your crafting to-do list. I had a lot of fun experimenting and testing with this technique, and I hope you will too. And if you didn't happen to catch my packing tape transfer hacked video, I'll put a link to that down below in the description. Do this technique on a piece of packing paper. We get all kinds of packing paper from Amazon and just parcels that are being delivered. I hate throwing it out, so I always have a stash of it. You can also use a paper bag or even regular paper. You want to take your paper and scrunch it up really well. Really scrunch it, really wrinkle it as much as you can. Now you have to be a little bit gentle because we don't want to rip or tear it, but scrunch it in different directions until it really looks wrinkled. I've recently got really interested in junk journaling, so I'm always looking for different ways to create really fun paper to add to my journaling projects, and this is one that I'm excited to use. I'm going to cut this down to size so it's a little bit easier to manage when I show you the rest of the technique. And I'm just going to scrunch the ends that I just cut so they're nice and wrinkled also. I want the paper to have the color of leather. I've taken a little bit of instant coffee and warm water, mixed it up in this little dish, and I just have a sponge, and I'm just going to sponge that whole piece of paper. And if you don't want to use the coffee stain, you can always use tea, or you can use a really watered down acrylic paint and just choose colors that you think kind of mimic the look of leather, and you'll get a really nice result. I let the coffee stain completely dry. Now I have some pigment ink on a pad, and I'm just going to just lightly rub it on top of that paper now. And wherever there's a wrinkle, that ink is going to pick up on that wrinkle and it's going to accentuate it and make it look like leather. We're getting there. This is just ink that you use for stamping. You can find it at any craft store. I let the ink dry and now we're scrunching it up. Just being careful, you don't want to rip or tear it, but we just want to re-wrinkle it. We're going to flatten it completely out again, and then we're going to go over it again with that pigment ink, and it's going to pick up on some other wrinkles after we scrunched it up again. There's something about old vintage leather that's worn and well used that I absolutely love and I'm really drawn to. So when I create this paper, it just makes me have that feeling of that type of leather. Okay, we've got the paper all prepped. Now we're ready for the secret ingredient. Grab some hand cream. Doesn't matter what kind, as long as it's not colored. You want something that's going to be white or clear. And just rub it into your paper. Rub it in really well into all those little wrinkles and all those nooks and crannies. And this will also work with hair conditioner. It works the same as it does on your hair or your hands or your skin. It's softening the fibers in that paper and making it have that leather feel. Just as conditioner does or hand cream does, this is working the same way. Now I'm just going to really carefully just scrunch that paper together and get all that hand cream absorbed right into that paper. You got to be really careful because you don't want to rip it or tear it now that we've gotten to this point. Another benefit to this DIY is you're also moisturizing your hands while you're making it. We're going to flatten it right out, and then we're going to set it aside and let it dry and soak right into the paper. And here's the end result. We've taken packing paper and with a few steps, we have transformed this into a piece of faux looking leather, which I'm really excited to use in my DIY projects. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial and it's inspired you to make some for yourself. I'm making faux tintype photos and they're really easy to create, and I'm going to show you today how you can make your own. Tintypes were really popular in the 19th century and they were produced on just a thin sheet of metal. And this is what you're going to need to create your own. Some clear transparency film. I'll put the link to that down below in the description, and this is for inkjet or laser jet. And I've got a frame from the thrift store, and you need some tin foil. You can use any size frame up to a sheet of paper, but I'm going to take the glass out of this one, and then we're going to grab that tin foil and the back of that frame. I'm using my glue stick and I'm applying it liberally all over that cardboard backing. And then we're going to take the tin foil and we're going to lay it down really flat, trying to get out as many bubbles and wrinkles. Of course, you're going to have some wrinkles, which we want, but try to get the majority of them out. And then I'm going to take my credit card and I'm just going to flatten it even more so we know that we have that glue stuck really well to the tin foil. We're going to take our scissors and we're going to trim off all the extra tin foil around the edge. Now it's time to pick a photo for our project. If you have an old photo in your stash, I would scan it and put it into your computer and size it to the project that you're going to use it on. Or I have some in my Etsy store, this one in particular, that you can grab and try this project. Now we're going to take a sheet of that clear transparency film and we're going to load it into our printer. The transparency film has a side that you need to print on, so make sure you're reading the instructions and feeding it through your printer the right way so it prints on that side. This one's all done and we have it printed out, and you can see there's a smooth side that has no ink on it, and then the other side it's printed on. I'm using a laser printer, but this paper will work on an inkjet also. Now comes the fun part where we can just get creative, and I'm just using my acrylic paint that I had in my stash. This is just a brown acrylic paint. I've watered it down a little bit and I'm just placing it on that tin foil in the most natural way that I think this photo would have aged. No right or wrong way of doing this, and if you don't like the way that it's turning out, you can go back, wipe it off, and start all over again. Here's a little trick that I love to do that gives an old antique look to acrylic paint. This is just alcohol and a little dabber, and I'm just dropping it into that acrylic paint, and when you do, it kind of goes in a circle and bursts open, giving it that aged water stained look. And you can go back in and add more paint, or you can add more alcohol. Just keep playing with it until you like the way that it looks. You're also not limited to just using a brush. You can also sponge it on. You can use a piece of paper towel and dab your paint on. And it's just something that we can just get creative with and try until we like the look of it. These are fantastic to add to junk journals or mixed media projects. And you're not limited to doing it in a frame. You can do them on hang tags or on envelopes. The possibility is endless. I'm going to take just a piece of paper towel and I'm dabbing up a lot of that extra that I had on there. Again, we're just kind of just playing with it until we get the look that we like. I'm not going to throw this napkin out either. I will use that in my junk journaling later on. I'm now taking my paintbrush and just flicking paint on here and there. I've switched to a darker black color. Also, if you have alcohol inks, this project is perfect for that too. I don't play around with alcohol inks that much, so I don't have any in my stash. So I know I can get really good results just with this acrylic paint. And plus it's a little bit cheaper. Now I'm going to just take some of that black acrylic paint and I'm just dabbing it all around the edges, because these old tintype photos, if you look back and Google some pictures of them, have a really dark edge all around the outside. And as you're working away, you can pick up that transparency film and you can hold it over top of the frame and see how it looks. If the paint's still wet, make sure you're not dropping it down, and then you can go back and you can add some more. I've got some gold now that I'm just kind of flicking on here and there. I can go back with some alcohol and dab it in and give it that water stained look. And I think once these are done, they actually look pretty authentic. I think I'm getting pretty close here. Now I'm going to pick it up and I'm just going to let some of that paint just kind of roll across that tin foil. Again, just giving it that really aged look. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry. And this is what we created. I think this is going to be a fantastic background for that vintage photo that I printed on the transparency film. Now we're going to take some spray adhesive and we're just going to lightly spray over the top of that piece of tin foil, and then we're going to lay our transparency film on top of that tin foil. We want to make sure that we're putting the printed portion of that photo faced down into that tin foil. You don't want to use any type of glue or Mod Podge because I find that it moves the paint around on the tin foil, so spray adhesive does work the best. And I'm just going to trim off the extra transparency film around the edges. And this film also works on a laser printer or an inkjet. I'm using a laser printer here, but it's great to have the option if you only have an inkjet. So here's all completed, and I think it looks pretty authentic. It has that water stained look and just that printed on metal photo. And the possibilities are endless with this. Imagine adding it into your junk journaling projects or your mixed media, or even just creating an old photo to frame on a wall in your home. So go through your old photos and see if you have some that you want to turn into a tintype-like photo. Scan them onto your computer, size them to fit your project, and give this technique a try. Okay, so here's what you need to do this project. You're gonna need some shaving cream. I just got some cheap stuff from the dollar store. Any kind of acrylic paint, any colors, mix and match whatever you like, some paper, and some little dishes. I've got a mixture of water and acrylic paint. I did 2 parts water to 1 part acrylic paint and mix them well, really together really well. You want to have a dish the same size as your computer paper so you can put the paper right into the dish flat. I'm filling it all up with shaving cream. It's probably about an inch deep. And then I'm going to take my watered down acrylic paint and just kind of pour it randomly all over that shaving cream, because that's what's going to create this different texture on your paper. Get creative, pour as many colors as you want, swirl them all together. Each piece of paper is going to be uniquely different. So you're just going to press the paper right into that acrylic paint and shaving cream. And I think this one I actually maybe left in a little bit too long. It made the paper a little bit soggy, because when I pulled it out and went to scrape off the shaving cream, it tore the paper a little bit. So as you'll see as we go along, the next paper I didn't leave in quite as long, but you can see the beautiful colors that this makes on the paper. And I'm just taking a ruler, very gently, just scrape it along that paper and remove the shaving cream. And then you can go back. As you can see here, I got a little skewer. I'm just mixing up those colors, making kind of a really fun pattern, putting a piece of paper in, pulling it out. You're going to take your ruler again, scrape that shaving cream off, and I'm just going to work away and do a few more sheets, add different colors as we go, and I'll show you the outcome on how beautiful they are. Now the first colors that I used had kind of mixed into the shaving cream, so I just added this orange and green and gold color on top of that, swirled it around, and we're gonna get now another completely different color on this paper, and this one is beautiful. So you just kind of fool around with your favorite colors, and when you're finished all of these, you can use them for your scrapbooking, your mixed media art. You can see what I'm going to do with them in the end. I'm going to make them into signs with some graphics on them. The possibilities are endless when you make some of this beautiful paper. Now it is a little bit messy. I had some paper towel handy so I could wipe it up. I'm just doing this on my craft table, so I don't have to worry about the paint too much. And the shaving cream obviously has some soap in it, so it's easy to wipe away. But look at the pattern that that made. Isn't that gorgeous? Again, just going to add some more color on top of the color that was already there. Put some paper in, scrape it off. And it's almost like it's a surprise. You're not quite sure what you're going to get, but when you scrape it off, it's like, wow, this is awesome. Okay, so here's the 6 sheets that I finished, and you can see just by adding different colors as we went along, how each one looks so different. And you could also do them for different seasons, and that's the one that I ripped a little bit, the very first one that I left in a bit too long. But I'm going to take my iron now and press them flat, and I'm going to show you what I made with them. I'm going to take that paper now, put it in my printer. I've picked out some graphics, and I'm going to print right on those papers and make them into some wooden signs. If you're interested, I have an Etsy store right full of graphics, and you can have a look and grab some of these if you want. Use the code SAVE50 and you can get 50% off my whole Etsy store. This one you can see that paper was a little bit dark and you can't see the graphics once I printed on them. So if that's something that you want to do, make sure you're doing lighter colors so the graphics will show up when you're doing your projects. I've got 4 pieces of wood just painted with some chalk paint. and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to decoupage that paper onto the wooden pieces. I've sized the graphics to fit these, and then I've cut them down, left them a little bit bigger so I can sand them off once they're dry. I put the paper on, used a little bit of parchment paper to press them down so I'm not rubbing off the ink from the graphic, and then sealed them up, and this is how they turned out. I took my sander when they were completely dry and distressed them all around the edges and finished them off, but look at all that neat color in that paper. So gather up some shaving cream, get some acrylic paints together, mix some color combinations, and give this technique a try because it is so much fun. This is a great DIY to do with your kids or your grandkids. It is a little bit messy because of the shaving cream, but it cleans up really easy. So give it a try and let me know what you think down in the comments. All about transferring onto tissue paper. I picked this tissue paper up at the dollar store, and I'm also going to use these CD labels. What we're looking for is that shiny paper underneath. I use this a lot in my transfer videos, and this works perfect for this project. Because we're peeling the labels off of this paper, I like to run it through my printer and print on it, and then we can add that to our mixed media projects, junk journaling, paper crafts, cards, so many possibilities. So we're just going to peel these stickers off, and then we're going to use that shiny sheet of paper underneath for our transfer technique onto tissue paper. I always find these labels at the thrift store if you go to the stationery section, but you can also find it on Amazon or your local stationery store. Now we want to load that paper into our laser printer, making sure you're putting it in so it's going to print on the shiny side. You can experiment with an inkjet printer, but I find that the ink smears really easy and it's kind of difficult to get a good transfer. That being said, give it a try, but it does work best with a laser printer. And we've printed off our graphic on that shiny side of that label paper. I love this graphic. It's available in my Etsy store. It's ephemera that's perfect for junk journaling, mixed media to turn into cards, so many possibilities. You want to make sure that you're not touching that toner because it will rub off easy, so just be really careful when you're handling it. I've cut a piece of tissue paper just a tiny bit bigger than that label sheet, and we're going to be really careful and gently press it down on that label sheet. We're going to be using our Mod Podge mat. I'm going to put a little bit in a dish. I got a big clump here. That's the one thing about Mod Podge. It sometimes likes to clump up a little bit, and I'm going to add some water to it. Also, you can see I already had a little bit of water in that dish, just enough to maybe a 50-50 mixture. So when we're spreading it, it's going to spread easier. And we're going to take a brush and rub that water and Mod Podge all over that piece of tissue paper. I like to start from the middle and work my way out because it kind of prevents any air bubbles or wrinkles. Although the wrinkles don't really matter, it kind of gives it character, but it just helps it go on smoother. You also want to use a very gentle hand because you can rip or tear the tissue paper really easy. Don't have any tissue paper in your stash? Use one ply of a napkin, or you can also try using some toilet paper or paper towel. Just experiment with this technique because there's so many possibilities, but my favorite is to use tissue paper. I love experimenting with different transfer techniques, and I have a huge video with every transfer technique that I've ever tried all put together in one. I'll put the link to that down below in the description, or you can click it up here in the corner. I'll also put a QR code if you want to scan that because it's such a great resource for all of your DIY projects that you can try all of these different transfer techniques. This one right here is right up in one of my top 5 transfer technique methods. If you do find that you rip a little bit of your tissue paper, don't fret because it does get really fragile when you're adding that Mod Podge and water to it. Just rip a little piece off, add it to that area, dab it so the Mod Podge soaks through, and you're fine. If you want to speed along the drying process, you can use a heat gun, but if you don't have a heat gun, don't worry, you can just set it aside and let it dry completely. I'm going to do another sheet. This is another ephemera graphic that I have available in my Etsy store that's lots of fun to craft with. We're going to add just a little bit of brown acrylic paint to that Mod Podge and water mixture and stir it really well until it's completely incorporated. And we're going to do the same process as we did with the first one. I've cut out a piece of tissue paper a little bit bigger than that label sheet, and we're going to start brushing on from the middle, working out with the Mod Podge, acrylic paint, and water mixture. Okay, now our first sheet is completely dry. This is a crucial step. You have to make sure it's completely dry, and then you just peel that tissue paper away from that label sheet, and you have a transfer that's happening on the tissue paper. This isn't a perfect transfer. You're going to have little bits and pieces that aren't going to attach onto that tissue paper, but I love it because I think it gives it that distressed look. And this is so satisfying to peel this away and see that image end up on that tissue paper. I have a lot of people ask me if you can reuse that carrier sheet, and I do find if you use a little bit of rubbing alcohol and take off any ink that was left on it, you sometimes can use it 2 or 3 times again. But isn't this transfer fabulous? You can see my hand through it, so anything that you're putting underneath it is going to show through. I've got some homemade paper that I'm showing you what it looks like. This is a piece of faux homemade paper that I used, and see how you can kind of see it through. It's perfect for adding to junk journals. I also like to use these on glass jars because if you don't want to paint your glass jar, you can put this transfer on it and you can put a candle in your glass jar and it'll sparkle through and it looks beautiful. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I'm going to cut out this frame portion of this transfer, and of course you can keep all these little pieces that you cut off and add them to your mixed media projects. Just tuck them away, don't throw them out. And I'm just taking a pair of sharp scissors and cutting away this frame, and we're going to add it to a glass jar. I've cleaned my glass jar really well, wiped it down with some rubbing alcohol, and now we're going to add this transfer onto it. I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat. I'm going to put some on the back of it and then just add it to the glass jar. You will find with this technique that one side is going to be shiny and the other side is going to be matte. So you can decide what side you want to show on your project and flip it over either way. But the Mod Podge as a glue works really well to adhere it to your projects. If you have one of your own photos, you can print that on the label sheet and then do this technique, and you can transfer one of your family photos onto a glass jar, and they make really great gifts. The second sheet is completely dry, and again, you have to make sure you let it dry completely. This one transferred fantastic. And again, it's so satisfying to peel this away and see the image transfer onto that tissue paper. I love inspiration. So what would you use this image transfer for? Let me know down in the comments and we can share some ideas together down there. And you can see that this has like a sepia look to it when we added that brown acrylic paint into the Mod Podge and water. I made some homemade paper recently, so I took that first image and I added it to a little greeting card, and I also made my own envelope and then just cut out some of the portions of that transfer and added them to the envelope. And here's a little candle lit in that glass jar, and you can see how it sparkles through that image. It's just beautiful. And here's without a candle that you can fill with maybe some treats, or so many possibilities with this technique. Into the fantastic technique that's going to save you some serious cash. Who doesn't love those rub-off transfers? They add an instant touch of class to any project, but let's be honest, they can be a bit pricey. Today I'm going to show you how you can make your own rub-off transfers for a fraction of the cost. It's really easy, simple products. Let's get started. To make your own rub-off transfers, we'll need some label sheets. I always find these at the thrift store, but you can also find them at the stationery store. These are old CD label sheets and they're perfect. We don't want the paper on top. We just want that plastic paper underneath. Now I have this beautiful floral sheet of graphics that I've designed. It's available in my Etsy store if you want to grab it and try this technique yourself. But first I'm going to put my label sheet through my printer and print on the paper instead of wasting those labels. We can add those into our junk journaling or mixed media projects later on. Once we've peeled them all off the label sheet, you're going to see that shiny side on that plastic sheet. That's what we want to print on. I'm using my inkjet printer here, but you can also use a laser printer, and we're going to print it on that entire sheet. One of the best things about this DIY method is it's compatible with inkjet printers. This means you can create stunning transfers with all the color and vibrancy that you want, unlike some other methods that are kind of limited to just using a laser printer. I'm going to be applying this transfer onto a piece of scrapbooking paper, but these can actually be used on any smooth surface. Painted wood, other types of papers, canvas. Just experiment and see what works best for you. Once you've chosen your surface, lay that label sheet flat on it. Now, to transfer the image, I recommend using a brayer. However, a credit card can work in a pinch. Just be really careful. If that sheet moves around, the ink's going to smear and you won't get a good clean transfer. So keep it nice and steady as you apply pressure. Using the full sheet here for demonstration purposes, but you can definitely create transfers with individual floral elements. Just carefully cut them out of the label sheet. Be sure to avoid touching the ink while you're cutting, and then simply place that floral image exactly where you want it on your project, taking advantage of the smaller size for a more precise placement. Make sure you apply firm pressure to transfer the ink completely onto the paper, and then gently peel off that label sheet, and you should have a transfer. It might appear a little bit faded, but don't worry, I'm going to show you how to fix that. If you want a more vibrant transfer, then here's the next step. Grab your Mod Podge and apply a very thin coat across your project. Think of it like almost a light dry brush application. You don't want a thick layer, you just need a subtle touch. And I'm using Mod Podge matte, so it's not going to be too noticeable. Now carefully place that label sheet back down. Be careful to press it firmly and avoid any slipping, which would cause the ink to smear. Once it's positioned, use your brayer and apply even strong pressure to ensure that ink transfer is going to work well onto that Mod Podge surface while it's still wet. Of course, this is an optional step whether you want to have a more faded looking transfer or a vibrant transfer. Once the Mod Podge completely dries, peel that label sheet and admire your beautiful, vibrant transfers. This technique truly opens up a world of possibilities, allowing you to create stunning rub-off transfers using your inkjet printer at a fraction of the cost. Here's a side-by-side comparison. The transfer without the Mod Podge appears to be a bit faded, while the one with Mod Podge is nice and vibrant. It's just a matter of adding that extra step to achieve your desired look. For those wondering, this technique works on fabric too. Here's a cotton fabric transfer with just a little bit of Mod Podge. Isn't it gorgeous? I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial on creating your own rub-off transfers. This is a fantastic way to save money, and if you're considering buying pre-made transfers, this technique offers a much more affordable alternative. For this technique, it's best to choose a fabric that's absorbent rather than slippery or shiny. I picked up this fabric at the thrift store. Any cotton blend will do the trick perfectly. These great graphics are in my Etsy store and they're just perfect for this project. I've printed them on plain computer paper using my laser printer. But don't worry if you have only an inkjet printer, it'll work too. It might be a bit more tricky and the results might not be as sharp, but it's definitely worth a try. I'm going to cut them down to match the size of the fabric I want to transfer them onto. Today I'll be working on quite a few, so stick around until the end so you can see how they all turned out. If you happen to have a collection of small fabric scraps, these DIYs are perfect for using them up and adding a special touch to your various crafts. Now let's move on to transferring this photo onto the fabric. For this step, I'm going to be using my Mod Podge mat. I'm applying a generous coat of the Mod Podge over the entire photo, making sure to cover it right to the edges. And then I'm going to flip it over and carefully position it exactly where I want it on the fabric. I'm going to press it down firmly to ensure that it adheres well, and we are then going to sit it aside and let it dry until the next day. Don't be afraid to get creative with this technique. It works beautifully with both photos and graphics, so let your imagination run wild. Give it a try on different fabrics and see what kind of results you get. Personally, I love to use this method to create hang tags or to incorporate into my junk journaling projects. Now that these have dried for 24 hours, it's time to reveal the transferred graphics. Grab a small dish of warm water and a soft little rag, and we're going to gently wet the paper until you can start to see the graphics show through. Be careful not to oversaturate it. Once everything is wet, it's time to remove the paper. Start by using your rag and begin in the middle, working your way outwards. Rub off the paper in gentle circular motions. You'll notice the paper starting to come off, revealing that graphic underneath. Be careful not to be too aggressive. You only want to remove that top layer of paper. Avoid rubbing the graphic itself. After you remove the paper, you're going to notice that it's starting to roll up and separate from the graphic. And once you've taken off that top layer, use your fingers to gently rub off the remaining paper. I find that using your fingers works best because you can feel if there's any paper residue left. It's hard to tell if you've gotten it all off just with a rag, so rely on your sense of touch to ensure that you can get all the last of that paper off with your fingertips. After you believe you've removed all of the paper and the transfer has dried, you might notice a faint white haze or residue. Don't worry. Simply use your fingertips, dip them in a little bit of water, and gently rub off any of the remaining paper. You might have to do this a few times before you get it all off. It might take a bit of time, but I personally find it's quite relaxing. I just sit back, I just rub off that paper, enjoying the moment, and I keep rubbing until that beautiful graphic shows through on the fabric. Now that I've removed all the paper, I'm going to use my Cricut weeding tool to gently fray the edges of the fabric. This will give it a rustic, primitive feel that I think suits this photo perfectly. It's a simple step, but it adds a really nice touch to the finished piece. Now that we've removed all the paper and frayed the edges, it's time to apply a top coat. I'm going to be using the Mod Podge mat, again, to completely cover the fabric and seal everything up. It's a personal preference, so you can skip this step if you prefer. I personally like the look of it. Plus it helps prevent any further fraying and keeps everything intact. If you prefer a glossy finish, you can use your Mod Podge gloss instead. For me, I prefer the Mod Podge mat that provides that perfect look. With the first one all finished, I'm going to attach it to a card. I've grabbed some scrapbooking paper, and to give it a distressed look, I'll ink around the edges. Then using the glue stick, I'm going to apply it to the front of the card. It's such a simple and easy way to create a fun DIY project that anyone would be delighted to receive. All the photo and graphic transfers on the fabric are now finished, and I'm thrilled with the way that they turned out. If you're interested in trying this technique and using these graphics, they're available in my Etsy store. I've created bookmarks and some cards and some hang tags, but the possibilities are truly endless. I'll include the link to the store below in the description. We're making a homemade decal and frame for homemade paper. I've picked up 2 canvases from the dollar store. The size of canvas that you buy will determine the end result of your paper that you're making. These are 8 by 10, and I'm just taking off the canvas, removing the staples from both of those canvases. Now, I didn't have any screen out of an old window, but if you did, that would work perfect. I picked up this screen from Amazon. I'm just using my staple gun to attach that screen really firmly to that wooden frame. Creating your own decal and paper making frame can be cost effective and an alternative to purchasing a new one, as it can sometimes be really pricey. Make sure to stretch the screen tightly and secure it firmly with the staples onto that wooden frame. Then it's going to create a smooth surface when we're making paper. Afterwards, neatly trim off all the excess screen to give it a nice and clean look, and we're ready to make paper. As you can see, the frame without the canvas now fits snugly on top of that screen frame, and this is going to determine the size of the paper that we're making. I make a point to save every bit and piece of paper that I don't use, and it's amazing how quickly all these little scraps can accumulate. I gather all of my scrap paper into a big bowl and I pour hot water over top of them. Then I let the mixture steep overnight, allowing that paper to break down and soften. This step is really important because we want to make sure that that paper is fully broken down without any lumps when we blend it into a pulp. After letting the paper soak overnight, I transfer it into a small blender that I picked up at the thrift store, and I only use it in my craft room. I put the paper in and then I add water until it's almost full, and then blend it until it reaches a smooth consistency. Next, I pour the pulp into a strainer, allowing the excess water to drain out into another large bowl. This step helps separate the pulp from the water, preparing it for the next stage of paper making. While the paper is draining into a larger bowl, I gently squeeze out the excess water, and once most of the water is removed, I transfer that pulp into another bowl, ready to make more batches until all my paper scraps are used up. I can also reuse the water drained from the previous batch by adding it into the blender and finishing up all of my paper scraps. Transformed all my paper scraps into pulp and carefully drained out most of the water. Now I'm ready to take the next step, and I have a large container filled halfway with water, and I'm going to add 2 handfuls of the pulp into it. I'm going to swirl it around really well, ensuring that all that pulp is mixed into that water, and the end result should be a texture that looks something like this. Now we're ready to use our homemade frame and decal. We're going to carefully lower it into the water, swooshing it back and forth to evenly distribute that paper pulp. Then we're going to gently lift it up, allowing the water to drain away. It may take some practice to get the right amount of paper pulp on your frame and decal, but after a little bit of practice, you're going to get consistent results. I'll let it sit for a minute and just let the water drip off, and then I'm going to take these pieces of cotton. These are actually a bed sheet that I got from the thrift store, and I cut them a little bit larger than my frame. I'm going to lay it down on the table, and then I'm going to place my paper frame paper side down on top of the fabric. Using a sponge, I'm going to carefully remove any of that excess water, and we can squeeze it into our bowl where our pulp is. Now comes the fun part. I have some dried flower petals that I saved from Valentine's Day. I'll crumple them up in my hand and sprinkle them onto the pulp, swirling them around evenly to distribute them. This way the paper will have a lovely fleck of those rose petals in it. You can also add little bits of string, bits of leaves, or other types of flowers, or little tiny pieces of paper, or coffee grinds, or tea leaves. Just get creative, and this is going to make unique and beautiful paper. You can also experiment with natural dyes such as beet juice, spinach, turmeric to add vibrant colors to your homemade paper. This allows you to customize your paper to suit any type of project, and it gives it a one-of-a-kind piece of paper with a personal touch. I'm making multiple sheets of paper with the pulp that I created, and I'm going to layer them on top of each other on a towel I've laid out on the floor. Now, once all of these sheets are done, I'm going to spread them out in my craft room here to dry overnight. You can also hang them in a clothesline in the sun and they'll dry really quickly, or if you have a drying rack, that would be excellent. After 24 hours, your homemade paper should be dry and ready to use. Simply peel it off that cotton sheet and you'll have transformed scrap paper that might have ended up in the garbage into a beautiful piece of homemade paper. It's rewarding, it's eco-friendly, and it's a way to repurpose that waste and create something unique and sustainable. Paper that feels like fabric. Imagine soft textured sheets, perfect for collage, mixed media, journaling, or any DIY project. Today we're making Momagami paper, a Japanese technique for creating fabric-like paper from scratch. This technique takes regular paper and transforms it into beautiful soft sheets with a fabric-like feel. No fancy equipment needed, just a few simple steps. And here's a few of the fabric paper pieces that I made: magazine sheets, regular computer paper. This is a journal that I made, and the cover is a piece of that fabric-like paper. And I love it because you can even sew it. It is so fantastic. It's soft, it's pliable. This is scrapbooking paper, and this piece I sewed on also. So many neat ideas that you can do with this. I'm going to show you how you can make it. First example, I'm going to use a piece of scrapbooking paper. I've got a squirt bottle with just warm water in it, and I'm just going to gently mist that piece of paper. It helps to make it flexible. And then I have my brayer, and I'm just going to press that water into that paper, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it sit for about 5 minutes. It's been 5 minutes, and now we're just going to start to fold that paper in. I like to work from the edges and just keep folding until you come to the middle. Not all paper works the same way for this technique. Thinner paper, like the kind you use in your printer, is perfect. Papers with a little bit of texture, like watercolor paper, or even leftover scraps of paper you're going to recycle, can be used. You want to stay away from super thick paper or shiny paper because they're just too stiff and too slippery. You want to work carefully. You don't want to rip the paper, so just go slow. This is actually kind of a relaxing technique. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and enjoy the process. Once I have it completely folded all up, I just like to scrunch it in my hands. And because we dampened it just a little bit with that water, it softened the fibers in the paper and it started the process of turning this into a fabric-like paper. And here's where the technique can differ from person to person and what you like to use. Myself, I like to use a little bit of olive oil. I rub it into my hands and it just makes the paper a little more pliable. I've also seen people use coconut oil, hair conditioner, hand cream, lots of different techniques. This is just one that I prefer, but experiment with your paper and see what works best for you. I find you don't need very much. I just put a little bit on my hands and rub it into the paper. If you use too much, it just softens the paper and I find that it rips really easy. This isn't the only name for this technique. Because of its unique fabric-like texture, it's also sometimes called Japanese paper cloth or even paper leather. No matter what you call it, the fun part is creating this soft paper from ordinary scraps. This technique has been around for hundreds of years. Back then, people who made books, or better known as bookbinders, used a similar trick to create thin, strong paper for the inside of books. Over time, this technique has become more than just a book thing, and people started using it for all kinds of crafts. You want to keep just manipulating that paper, putting a little bit of olive oil on your hands, rubbing it in, and then scrunching that paper up. It does take time. It's something that you can probably do sitting in front of the TV or your computer watching a YouTube video. And in between, I like to take my brayer, roll the paper out flat. It helps spread out those paper fibers and make it easier to scrunch up. Use your oil sparingly. I got a little bit too much in the middle of the paper, but that's okay. When you set it aside, it dries and you won't notice it much. And you might find you have little rips here and there. That does happen. Just take your time and you're going to create some beautiful paper. This one's almost done. I'm going to set it aside and I'm going to let it dry completely. The next type of paper that I'm going to work on is a page out of a National Geographic. I wanted to show you this because it's a bit thicker, it's glossy, it's not quite as easy to do, but it can be done. I'm going to put a little bit of oil on my hands and again, just start folding up the paper, manipulating it. Now we could have sprayed a little bit of water on this, but it doesn't soak up the water because it's so glossy. So I skipped this step on the magazine page. Here's the magazine page all finished. It has a fabric-like feel, but it's kind of glossy. I really like it, and I think it's going to be great to add into some of my junk journals. Now I'm just going to do a regular piece of computer paper. Again, going to put a little bit of that olive oil on my hands and just start scrunching up that paper. The reason I choose to use the olive oil is I find that the coconut oil or hand cream is quite greasy as you're applying it on the paper, and it's really hard to get rid of that greasy feel. And I do find sometimes it transfers onto my projects also. I find the olive oil absorbs into the paper better. That's why it's my go-to. That's how easy it is to make Mamagami paper. This is one that I printed on afterwards with my laser printer, and I sewed an edge around it with my sewing machine. It works fantastic. This is just the regular piece of computer paper. You can see it's almost kind of flexible. And my magazine sheet, love this. This is going to go into my junk journaling. And I also made a little booklet, and I used a piece of that paper as the cover of the booklet. Sewed it all together. I used one of my fabric transfers on the front of it. This is going to make a great gift for my niece, actually. She loves to journal. It's homemade paper on the inside too. And here's some pieces of scrapbooking paper. This is another piece that I sewed a strip on. Try this technique. Have fun with it. Let me know down in the comments what you end up creating. I love using washi tape in lots of my DIY projects, and I'm going to show you today how you can make your own really simple, and you can make so many different designs. And to create your own washi tape, all you're going to need is some packing tape and some double-sided tape. I found this at the dollar store. It's really affordable and it's sticky on both sides. The first thing that we want to do is measure how wide our tape is, because that's going to be how wide our washi tape is. I always have lots of bits and pieces of different types of paper. This is a great project to use this up. I'm using my paper cutter and I'm cutting the strips the same width of the double-sided tape. This will work on any type of paper, napkins, scrapbook paper, magazine pages, or even pages out of a book. I've got all kinds of strips cut from my scrapbooking paper scraps, and the first thing that we're going to do is lay down a piece of parchment paper, or you can use wax paper, and tape it down to your surface. And once we have that taped down to our table, I'm going to get my packing tape, and the packing tape will go over top of 3 strips of that scrapbooking paper. Your paper might be a little bit thicker. You might not be able to get all 3 strips in, but if you can, then you'll put that right on top of the paper, and then I like to press it in really hard with a card and making sure there's no bubbles and no wrinkles. This technique is quite similar to the packing tape hack video that I did not that long ago. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link down below in the description because it's a really fun one to try. And to turn this into washi tape, we just have to add one more step. Now we're going to cut off the extra packing tape and then cut the 3 strips into individual pieces. I love being able to find different techniques and different tricks that we can craft with that just makes our projects more affordable, and we don't have to go out and buy all these extra products when we have all these things right in our craft room that we can just turn into something else. And I love being able to do this. So after seeing this project, you'll reevaluate what you want to throw out. We've got all the strips all cut apart now, and we've got a dish of warm water. We're just going to put those strips right in the warm water and let them soak for about 5 minutes. If your paper is thicker, it's going to have to soak for a little bit longer. If it's a thinner paper, then it won't take as long to soak. But what we're going to do is we want to rub off that thick paper from the back. I like to start it a little bit with a credit card, or you can use your nail. Now we're just going to rub away all of that paper, and you're going to be left with the image on the tape and all the paper backing being removed, much like the packing tape transfer trick that I did in my last video. This is the same thing, and if you don't want to go on and turn this into washi tape, you can always just put some Mod Podge or use a glue stick and adhere it to your project. Takes a little bit of patience to rub all the paper back off, but it's certainly worth it in the end. I've got all the paper rubbed off, and as you can see, it kind of makes it transparent. You can see through it. It's ready to turn into washi tape. I'm just going to work away at these other couple pieces, and then we'll go on to the next step. And there we have some of our strips of tape all ready. The paper's all been rubbed off the back. It's now made it transparent, and we are going to add the double-sided tape. Now I can find double-sided tape at my dollar store, and I've seen them at quite a few different ones, but if you can't, you can always grab some off of Amazon, and I'll put the link down below in the description. I'm just going to lay that double-sided tape onto the parchment paper. We're using parchment paper or wax paper because it won't stick to it. And then we're going to pick up that piece of tape that we have our paper on and lay it into that double-sided tape. Because it's sticky on both sides, that top of the tape is going to stick into the packing tape. Now you want to make sure you're laying it down on the part of the piece of tape that we rubbed the paper off of. So we're going to have the shiny side on the top and the paper side underneath. And we've created a piece of washi tape. Now to store this, so when we're ready to use it, I like to save all of my caps out of my recycling bin. This cap is actually off my dry shampoo bottle, and you're just going to wrap it around. It's not going to stick to it. It's going to peel off easily when you're ready to add it to your project. And you can also add the next layer on top of it of the same type of paper, so you can make a longer length. Just cut it off even, and then you can wrap the next one on top of that. And I have enough room on this cap that I can add 2 or 3 different types of washi tape onto one cap. Also, another tip, if you don't want to have the shiny side up, you can always flip it over and have the matte side of your paper on top, and then you don't have to have that shiny surface for your project. So it's kind of versatile. This is a cap off of a hairspray bottle, and you can see how I had 2 of these strips of the same design, and I'm just laying them on top. It works perfect for storing it. If you do a lot of paper crafting, this is a great way to make original washi tape that's one of a kind. You can add it into your junk journaling projects, mixed media projects, your scrapbooking, so many possibilities. And like I said before, if you don't want your washi tape to be shiny, you can always flip it over and apply the shiny side to the double-sided tape, and then you'll have the matte finish from where you rub the paper off on the top of your washi tape, and it just gives it a little bit of a different look. And I also love the idea that I'm saving all these caps out of the recycling bin too, and they store really well on a shelf or in a drawer when you have them all put together, and they stack up neatly. So save all those scrap bits and pieces of paper, turn it into washi tape to add to your DIY projects. And here is what I created, all these beautiful different original pieces of washi tape that I'm going to add into my junk journaling projects. and I hope you give this technique a try yourself. We're going to dive into the amazing world of fabric paper. This material is perfect for countless projects, book covers, gift tags, embellishments, wrapping paper. The possibilities are endless. To make this fabric paper, you're going to need a piece of cotton or a lightweight material like muslin or linen, along with some Elmer's glue, which is PVA glue, or Mod Podge. I actually prefer Mod Podge for this fabric paper, but whatever you have in your stash will work fine. And then you're going to mix it together, a 50-50 ratio with water. If you don't mix it in this ratio, when you apply it to the fabric, napkin, or paper on top, it's going to have a tendency to rip or tear really easily. So you want to make sure that it's quite liquid. I'm going to be doing this project on a non-stick baking sheet. I have that down on my table. And then on top of that, I have a piece of cotton. And this is just a big piece of cotton that I bought at the thrift store. It's got some coffee stains on it. It's going to be perfect. And then I'm using 1 ply of a napkin. I never throw out this piece because I always make custom napkins, and I'm going to show you later on in the video how I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to take this mixture and I'm going to spread it evenly across that piece of cotton fabric, and you want that fabric completely saturated. Before you do this step, I should have mentioned, you probably want to press it with an iron and make sure that you don't have any wrinkles in it. It's going to make the paper lay better when we're all finished. And I'm just going to go ahead and completely soak this piece of cotton, applying that Mod Podge and water mixture. And like I said before, if you want, you can also use some PVA glue, but I do find that I like the way that the Mod Podge works for this project better. Now that our cotton is completely soaked with that mixture, we're going to take our 1 ply of napkin and very gently lay it on that cotton fabric. You don't want to rub hard. I find just patting up and down with your palms very gently, allowing that glue mixture to soak into the napkin from the fabric. Let it sit for a few seconds before we add the next layer of glue. Now for this next step, you have to be really careful. I like using a paintbrush. You can gently coat that piece of napkin, stroking from the middle out. It's going to get rid of some wrinkles that may have happened. Although with this project, sometimes we embrace the wrinkles. We don't need to have them completely gone because it does give it some character for our fabric paper. But very gently brush on this glue solution. That's why it's so important to have it watered down with that 50-50 mixture, because if we didn't, it would be too thick and it would pull and tear on the napkin. Okay, I set it aside and it took about 15 or 20 minutes to dry. It'll all depend on your weather and temperature. Now you can see it's a blend of fabric and paper, but it's flexible. You can fold it and you can use it. And I also love the one feature about it, you can sew on it. Now for this piece, I'm going to add another napkin on the other side. So it's going to be a double piece of fabric paper. We're going to apply that glue solution on the other side of the cotton the same way we did on the front, making sure it's soaking right through that fabric and applying it over the entire piece. Now those napkins or tissue paper or book pages or sewing pattern sheets that are easily tearing and hard to incorporate into your DIYs can be turned into fabric paper that's usable, durable, and versatile. You can use it in so many different ways. Now we're going to take that 1 ply of this butterfly napkin and carefully lay it into the glue on that fabric. Again, just pat really gently. You don't want to rub too hard because it's going to tear and get all those little bubbles or wrinkles out, making it lay smooth. Just take your time. I would also experiment with different types of fabric. The only thing you want to look for in a fabric when you're doing this is that it's able to absorb the glue into the fabric. You don't want a type of fabric where the glue is just going to sit on top and not soak in, because we need it to bond with the napkin or the type of paper that you're using. Let's apply that glue solution on top of the napkin again, being very gentle, ensuring we work from the middle out, and let's focus on getting any bubbles or wrinkles that might be happening. Remember, we can always embrace those imperfections, but our goal is to smooth out everything the best that we can. Now comes a satisfying part, peeling off that non-stick sheet and seeing our beautiful fabric paper that we've created. And here's our fabric paper. It's versatile for crafting. It's strong and durable. It's flexible and for easy folding. It's customizable with different fabrics, and you can also sew on it.
Now I'm going to show you how you can transform this fabric paper into an envelope. I've cut it into a 12 by 12 inch square, and we're going to fold it together, and it's going to effortlessly come together. It's foldable, yet it's strong and durable, and it's going to result in a beautiful envelope. And there we have it, a beautiful envelope crafted from fabric paper. I love having the pattern on the inside, and it makes a perfect gift. Now I'm going to show you how you can do it with your custom made napkins. I have a full tutorial which I'll link here, or I'll include in the description below, so you can see how I made these. Now you can use the same technique on your custom made napkins, and I'm going to demonstrate it on a piece of muslin. I adore this rooster graphic, and it's available in my Etsy store. You can find the link in the description below or right here if you'd like to use this graphic for any of your DIY projects. That's why I always keep that second ply of napkin that we peel away, because that's what I use to create these custom made napkins. Now we're ready to apply it onto that piece of muslin using the same process. And how cute is that? I'd love to hear how you would use this in your DIY projects and what you would use it on. I'm not quite sure about mine yet, so I'm going to set it aside until I get inspired. With this one, I broke out my sewing machine and I sewed around the edges, which was so easy to do. It didn't tear or pull. Just make sure it's nice and dry before putting it through your sewing machine. Otherwise, it won't work and it would clog up your needle. Here's a little journal that I made with a fabric and added a napkin to the outside. I sewed around the edges and it created a really cute little booklet. I've included some lined paper on the inside, and it's really nice just to use this fabric paper as journal covers or book covers. So many possibilities. I also did this process on some cheesecloth, and the results were fantastic. I had an old book with some really old brittle pages, so I did the same process. I tore off the book pages made them into smaller pieces, and then I added the glue on the cheesecloth, applied the book pages, and then coated it on each side, front and back, and it created the most beautiful fabric paper. And I'm going to turn these into bookmarks. These bookmarks are perfect for my junk journals, and they're so easy to put together. I'm glad I was able to save those book pages that were so brittle and just falling apart when I touched them. Now I've given them a new life, and I also sewed around the outside of these bookmarks.
Picked up this piece of fabric at the thrift store. It was $1.99. It's quite a bit of fabric, and it's cotton. You want to be using a fabric that's going to be able to absorb ink. Now you're also going to need some spray adhesive. You can get spray adhesive at any craft store. You can get it on Amazon. I'll put a link down below if you don't have any in your crafting stash to grab some. I'm cutting this fabric down to the size of a sheet of paper. And you want to make sure that you have your fabric nice and flat. So I always like to press it before I adhere it onto my piece of paper. I'm just using my iron on the highest setting with no steam and giving it a really good press to get all the wrinkles out of it. Now I've sprayed my piece of paper with the spray adhesive. Make sure you're doing it in a really well ventilated area. I actually take it outside, spray it, and then bring it back inside. And I'm going to trim all around the edges. You want to make sure you have it trimmed really well, because we're going to be putting this through our printer and we don't want any bits of fabric getting caught as it goes through. Now when I'm doing these DIY projects, I have printers that are just in my craft room, that's all I use it for. So I never have any problems if something happens when I'm trying to do some wild stuff on my printer that I haven't racked a good office printer. That being said, I've never had any issues. So we're going to load our paper into the printer, making sure that we're loading it so we print on that fabric side. This is my laser jet printer, but this will also work on an inkjet, and I'll show you next project using the inkjet printer. And this is a pattern that I printed on this fabric. It's absolutely gorgeous. Now I'm going to take my cutter and I'm just going to cut it in strips of ribbon. I'm leaving the fabric still on that paper. It makes it much easier to cut into strips. You don't want to peel that fabric off yet. And you can do any width of ribbon that you like. I think this one I did for 1 inch. And then you just peel the paper away and you're left with a custom ribbon. This pattern is available in my Etsy store. If you want to check it out, you can grab it and you can make some of this ribbon yourself. So here we have all this beautiful ribbon ready to use on our DIY projects. I like taking my little Cricut tool and fraying the edges a little bit. Just kind of gives it that rustic feel. I always kind of love making everything look a little bit aged and rustic, and just peeling away a couple of those threads off the sides and the ends. So now with this sheet, I did the exact same process. Put the spray adhesive on a piece of paper, put some fabric on it. But this one I ran through my colored inkjet printer. My laser jet printer only prints on black ink, so I wanted to add some color. So this is on my inkjet printer. Now you have to remember that none of this is going to be washable. And if you don't want to cut these into ribbons, you can print off this sheet of fabric and incorporate that into a DIY project. Also, put a quote on it. So many possibilities. Now I'm going to cut this one into strips. Also, you can also use these if you do junk journaling, scrapbooking, mixed media. You can add these as embellishments on your pages. Absolutely beautiful. Now, if you want to design your own graphics or your own floral pattern, you can do that within Canva. They have a free program, you don't need to have the premium, that works really well for you to design some of these yourself. I'll put a link down below in the description to the Canva website. Just fool around on it, get the hang of it, and the possibilities are endless over on that website for all kinds of DIY projects. Now, if you want to make a piece of ribbon that's longer, I have some fabric glue. I just put a little bit along the edge, and then I attach the ribbon together. And of course, it's not going to be completely perfect. You're going to see the line, but these are really primitive ribbons, and I think it looks really cute when you can attach them all together, and it just gives you the option of having a longer piece. If you don't have any fabric glue, you can always use hot glue, or you could even staple it if you're using it within your junk journaling, and that would just give it a little bit of an extra effect. So here's a fast and easy way for you to custom make your own ribbon for your DIY projects. Of tea and coffee staining paper. And today I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can put a twist on that coffee and tea staining with just some things that you probably already have around the house. Steeping 7 or 8 tea bags in 4 cups of boiling hot water. Now, it can be a little bit acidic on your paper, so I always like to add just a little bit of baking soda just to neutralize it, so it will let your papers last longer. I put about a half a teaspoon into that 4 cups. And I let it steep for a couple hours, and now I'm just pouring it onto a pile of regular computer paper. I've put enough of that tea in to cover all of the papers and let everything soak all the way through, just kind of spreading it around, making sure I have everything covered. Now, if you want to kick your papers up a notch, I always like to take some instant coffee and just sprinkle it on the paper, just here and there, and it gives it more of an antique look. Just letting it melt right into the paper. Once all that instant coffee has melted into that paper, you can lift that one sheet out carefully, you don't want to tear it, and set it aside and let it dry, and then go on to the next sheet and repeat that until you have them all set aside and letting them dry, spread out evenly. And if it's nice and sunny outside, it's always really nice to take it and let the sun do its work, because they'll dry really quickly. I had a little bit of that tea solution left over in this baking pan, so I'm adding some instant coffee and I'm gonna mix it up really well, and then I'm gonna put it in a squirt bottle. You want this solution a little bit darker than the original solution that we used. Now, I always like to press my papers before I do the next step. I just get some parchment paper, iron over it without any steam, and then I go through my craft room and see whatever I can find to create neat patterns on coffee paper. The first thing that I'm going to use are these wooden discs that I found at the dollar store. I've laid them out where I want them on the paper, and I'm spritzing them with that darker solution that I put in the spray bottle, drying it with my heat gun, and you can see it creates circles all over your paper. So you've just given it that little bit of an extra depth that's great to use on your projects. I also had these wooden squares and this little plaque, and I'm spraying it with that solution again and then removing them and then going to dry it with the heat gun. It creates an amazing pattern on your paper. Now this one's really cool. Went out to my garden and I just found some leaves off of a plant, and I'm just going to space it out on the paper where I want it. And again, we're going to spray that solution onto it, and this one turns out fantastic. Soak it really well and then just gently lift off those leaves, and look at the pattern that it leaves on the paper. I just love it. And it'll also soak through to the other side, so you can decide which one you like better when you're creating it. I just went out and found a great big maple leaf in my yard, and same thing, place it on the paper where we want it, squirt it with that solution, let it soak right in, and then take everything off. And look at this gorgeous leaf that's left on that paper. This is some shelf liner. Just laying it on that paper where I want it to have some pattern show through, squirt it with that squirt bottle, lift it up, and all those little holes are going to show through in your paper. So I bet as you're watching all of this, your mind is going a mile a minute trying to think of all the things that you can try to create texture on paper. Elastic bands. Just put them all over the paper where you think they'll look kind of neat, and again, spray it with that coffee and tea solution. Of course, none of these are perfect. They're all going to turn out different every time that you do it, but it just perks it up from just having a plain piece of coffee stained paper. I like to decoupage with these papers. You can use it in your junk journaling, your scrapbooking, any mixed media projects. There's just so many ways that you can use this paper. I had this scrap piece of lace. I'm going to see if I can get that to transfer some of the pattern onto the paper. Just lightly spraying it. You don't want to soak it, or it will soak all the way through. This one you can see I put probably a little bit too much of the coffee spray on it. But I'm going to try another one. I got another piece and I'm going to spray it again lightly and see if I can get more of this pattern to show through. And yeah, this one turned out nice. You can see the lace pattern in it, and it just gives it a real Victorian paper look. I had these flower cutouts that I picked up at the dollar store. Place them on the paper wherever you want. Give it a squirt with that coffee and tea solution, and then just take off those cutouts and see what you're left. And see how pretty these are? They're really intricate, and you can see it soaked through all those little leaves on the flowers. And I had this one. Now what I did with these is I sprayed them and then used them as a stamp on the paper, and it created kind of that botanical leaf look on the paper. And you can also take a little dropper and just drop that solution here and there, and it just kind of gives that even really older antique look. This one was a stencil that I used. I just squirted it on the paper and pulled it away. Again, really cool pattern that it left on the paper. Buttons. Squirt the paper with the buttons on them and then take them off, and you're going to be left with all these little circles all over your paper. And leaves. And this one you can just kind of dab around the outside, so you can have the leaf pattern on the inside showing through, and then the coffee and tea stain around the outside. And this method looks really neat too. Now I took that shelf liner again and my sponge and just sponged all over that to see if I could get some texture to show through. That one probably didn't work. It just soaked through too much. I should have probably used a squirt bottle, but you just have to kind of try and do different things and see what works for you. I have a little dabber and I'm just kind of squirting it all over. This would be really neat if you were going to put an antique map or an old written words on a piece of paper. This will give it the real aged look. So I've created some really neat papers just with stuff that I had in my craft room or outside to create different patterns and textures on coffee and tea stained paper. I have all kinds of farmhouse theme graphics that I'm going to print on all of these. And then I have a junk journal that I'm working on that I'm going to put them all into. So I loaded up the paper into my LaserJet printer and I printed off some of my graphics on this coffee and tea stained paper. And I think it really looks fantastic on all of these graphics that I made. And any of these graphics are all available in my Etsy store if you want to grab some of these and try out this technique for yourself. For this project, all you need is some instant coffee and warm water. Mix them well to create your stain, adjusting the amount of coffee to the desired darkness. Here's a fantastic way to create unique papers. Use a straw, drizzle the coffee onto your paper, and then gently blow it along with the straw. Watch as it adds character and charm to your paper, and this is such a simple and easy process. To add another twist to it and make colorful paper, simply mix food coloring with warm water and blow with the same process. It yields a fantastic and fabulous result. Enjoy experimenting with this and you will just love the outcome of your papers. Here's another fun way to use coffee to stain paper. Grab some lids or some tin cans, anything with a circular shape, dip it into the coffee, press it down on your page, and it's going to create beautiful circle embellishments. These papers are perfect for junk journaling, mixed media, envelopes, or to create your own DIY greeting cards. The possibilities are endless, and these techniques add such a unique twist to your creations. You can also have fun doing this technique using cookie cutters, or I've even used a potato masher. Each page turns out unique, and it's so enjoyable. Another way to add a twist to coffee staining is using a sponge and some salt. Dip the sponge into the coffee mixture, cover the entire page. Once it's fully covered, grab some salt. I'm using some Himalayan salt, but you can use any type. Sprinkle it over the wet coffee. Set it aside, let it dry completely, and once it's dry, wipe off that salt and it reveals a fantastic pattern on your paper. Now grab some string, anything that you have on hand, whether it's embroidery floss, thread, or even twine. Soak it in that coffee mixture and then cut it into small pieces and simply add it to the paper and let it soak in. Don't fuss too much with it, just lay it on top. That coffee stain from the string is going to seep into the paper and it's going to leave a wonderful impression. I absolutely love this technique, and make sure you watch to the end to see what I create with these coffee stain papers. I transform them into lots of various DIY projects that I'm sure is going to give you lots of inspiration. For the next method, wet the paper again using a sponge. Now lay down some crinkled and wrinkled saran wrap on top. Set it aside and let it dry completely. This technique creates a wonderful pattern on the paper resembling like an old vintage antique map. I also think it would make a beautiful journal cover. Another fun and unique coffee staining technique is to wet the entire paper again with that coffee stain. I'm just using regular computer paper too. You can mix up and use any type of paper. And then I'm going to sprinkle some instant coffee on top of that wet surface. As it melts, it's going to create a stunning pattern on the paper, and once it's dried, you're going to be amazed by the gorgeous results. And this technique never fails to impress, and I absolutely love it. Here's a super fun activity to do with kids. Just mix in some liquid dish soap into your coffee mixture, creating a bubbly solution. Stir it really well and then grab a straw and blow bubbles into the mixture. Carefully place the bubbles onto the paper and it's going to create this wonderful circular impression. It looks fantastic and kids are going to have a blast doing this. Remember to lay down a plastic tablecloth to keep things tidy so you don't make a mess. And you can also do this with food coloring and it'll create colorful papers. Here's an easy one one that you might not have even considered. Grab a paintbrush, dip it into that coffee mixture, paint on your paper. Getting creative with different designs like circles, herringbones, zigzags. Let your imagination run wild. These painted papers will be perfect for all of your DIY projects. There are other options that you can explore also. Try using food coloring and water like I mentioned before, or experiment with some soaked tea bags. Or another idea is to water down your acrylic paint and apply it to your papers. The key is to utilize materials you already have in your craft room so you don't need to go out and purchase anything new. It's a breeze to create beautiful effects with this technique. Just drizzle your coffee mixture, roll the paper around, let the coffee flow freely. Use your heat gun to dry it, and it's going to create this really beautiful streaking effect that's really going to add charm to your paper. Now here's a recap of all of the papers that we made creating different designs. The first one is using a straw, using your lids, and then the salt technique, which I absolutely love, just using some yarn or some string, drizzling that instant coffee right into the wet paper. Bubble paper is absolutely fantastic. Get out your paintbrush and just paint on your paper, or just let it roll around. And then the saran wrap one. Some of that paper I turned into hang tags. It's going to be perfect to add in a gift or on your junk journaling. I turned a bunch of the papers into a little journal. These are so easy to create, and I just stapled the papers together, added some embellishments. I made a tiny little envelope that we can put a little note in or add a little bit of money. And I stamped on this paper because I thought it looked like an old handwritten letter. And you can also just print on them. I've printed these graphics. They're in my Etsy store, and they make beautiful papers to incorporate into your junk journaling. Today is all about aging paper super quick. I've just printed off one of my graphics on a plain piece of paper, and I'm going to transform it into something that looks old and vintage antique. This process is perfect if you want to create paper that looks old for your journaling, for scrapbooking, for decoupage, for any sorts of arts and crafts. This works fantastic. So we're going to get started. The first step that I like to do is I like to make the edge of my paper ragged. That just makes it look a little bit more antique and a little bit more vintage. This is just a little dish of water, and I'm just rubbing it along the edge of the paper, and you can tell when it's soaked through, it'll start to lighten up. You can rip it, but I find it's hard to be consistent. This works great. It's just a pair of scissors, and I just take the scissors on the edge and just go along, and you can see how it just makes that edge ragged really easy. And you're just going to do that on all four sides. That easy. We've created a ragged edge. I've done tutorials before on my channel using all kinds of different products to age paper. Coffee, tea, lemon juice, soy sauce, vanilla. They all work fantastic. And I dried them in the oven, and it always takes a little bit of time. Today's tutorial is all about doing it quickly. You got a project you want to get done, but you want to create a fantastic antique looking piece of paper. Then this method works perfect. This can be a little bit messy, so make sure you have an area where it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it right on my craft table because this is easy to wipe up afterwards. We need instant coffee, a little dish of water, piece of paper towel, and just a spoon. You're going to take your instant coffee and put a good heaping teaspoon, doesn't really matter how much. You're going to scrunch it up in that paper towel. Make sure you got it in there really good in a little bowl. And you're going to set it in that dish of water and let it just soak for a minute and melt some of that coffee. Okay, now we are ready to start aging our paper. You're just gonna blot it on the paper randomly. It doesn't have to be in a pattern or anything. It's all about creating different textures on the paper. Dip it back in the water when it dries out. Get it right to the edge. You want that edge really dark. And the little bubbles in it that it creates, when they dry, it looks fantastic. And it smells yummy too. So you want to make sure you coat that whole piece of paper. I've got it all coated, and you can see the little bubbles in it. When that dries, it's going to look really neat on the paper. Now we're ready for the next step. Get out your heat gun. If you don't have a heat gun, you can use a hair dryer, but just be careful because the hair dryer blows out more of a burst of air and it might blow your paper around. But I just put it on a low setting and just dry your paper, and it doesn't take very long. It'll dry really quickly. And that's already dry. We're gonna flip it over because you wanna make sure, unless you're decoupaging it and you're not gonna see the back, but if you're doing a project where you're gonna see the back, flip it over and do the same process. And if you're finding the coffee is kind of wearing out, you can open it back up or get a new piece of paper towel and add coffee into it. As you can see a lot of that coffee has dissolved. So I'm just gonna put another scoop in there. Scrunch it back up, put it back in the water to activate it again, and then keep on going. And that's it. Created an antique looking piece of paper, vintage looking piece of paper really quickly. And the nice thing about it, no mess, just throw this out in the garbage and you're finished with it. I'm gonna do a couple more and show you how they turn out. Another thing that you can do before you coffee stain it is you can take it and you can scrunch it up into a ball. So it gives it that wrinkled look. And all these graphics that I'm using today, you can find in my Etsy store if you wanna try these techniques out yourself with these graphics. And now we've got a wrinkled piece of paper, and we can start to coffee dye it. If it starts to run out, you can add more coffee, get a new little piece of paper towel, and just keep going. Now, one thing that I will mention, I printed this off on my LaserJet printer, so my ink won't run. If you have a inkjet printer and you print on your paper first, your ink might run when you're doing this process. You can completely avoid that. Age your paper the full size and then put it through your printer and print on it afterwards if you have an inkjet. LaserJet, it works perfect. And there you have antique, aged looking paper in a matter of minutes. And it's so easy and works fantastic with very little mess. So let me know down in the comments if you've ever tried this aging technique that works really quick like this. I'd love to know how you made out. Before we jump into the next project, I just want to take a quick second. If you love making beautiful things from simple supplies that you already have, or you love thrifting or upcycling, you would absolutely love our Upcycled Society. I have a huge library of digital download printables and new ones being added every week. DIY recipe booklets, exclusive videos, so much more, all for less than a good cup of coffee a month. Everything is in one place whenever inspiration strikes, and the link is going to be right down below in the description. I would love if you could check it out. Okay, let's keep going. I've tested a lot of different ways to make glassine paper, and I found this method works the best for me, and it's with spray polyacrylic sealer.
I've just taken this out to my shed. I'm using some tracing paper first, and I'm spraying it with that polyacrylic spray, and you can see it, you can start to see through it a bit. It's giving it that glassine paper look. We're going to set it outside. We're going to let it dry, and this is how the tracing paper turned out. Now we're going to do some tissue paper. The tissue paper is a lot thinner than the tracing paper, so I have a lot of good vibes about this one. And I'm spraying it with that polyacrylic sealer. We're going to let it dry, flip it over, and spray it again. I'm just holding it with my pliers so it doesn't fly away. And I can see already how it's becoming a clear glassine piece of paper. That's fantastic. And this is just tissue paper from the dollar store. Now next we're going to do just a plain piece of computer paper that I've actually made thinner with some packing tape. And we're going to put it on that piece of cardboard, give it a spray, let it dry, flip it over. And it has worked pretty good, but it's still not as good as a tissue paper. Next I'm going to show you on a sewing pattern. This is a sewing pattern I picked up at the thrift store. It was missing pieces and I incorporated it into my junk journaling. But I wanted to make this look like glassine paper. So again, sprayed it, let it dry, flipped it over, and then sprayed the other side. This worked really fantastic, just as good as that tissue paper. And I also like the look of the pattern on it. I think it's really unique. I'm going to show you a bunch of different other papers. This is just a page out of the book, and I'm spraying it, letting it dry, flipping it over. It didn't really work all that great, but it did give it a really cool appearance to add to a junk journal. And here's some other papers that I used, some packing paper. Again, it looks really cool, but it doesn't look like that glassine paper, a piece of computer paper. The napkin, now if I had have gotten a napkin that didn't have such a dark pattern, it probably would have worked okay. The gift wrap paper didn't really work, some scrapbooking paper. So I think at the end of the day, my favorite papers to use to create the glassine paper is tissue paper, number one. Number two is that sewing pattern paper. And number three is the tracing paper. So this is tracing paper right here that I actually printed on with my laser printer. Now you can see when I'm putting that sewing pattern up against a picture underneath, you can see there's the tissue paper underneath. It's a really great alternative for store-bought glassine paper, which can be really expensive. So give these techniques a try. Today we're diving into a fun and easy project. We're going to be making our own rice paper. Rice paper is super versatile. It's thin, it's translucent, and it's perfect for all sorts of crafts. So whether you're a seasoned crafter or just starting out, you're going to have to try this. We're going to walk you through the simple steps to create your own unique rice paper. I'm going to show you how to make rice paper using napkins, and you can also use tissue paper. You want to only use one ply of the napkin. These napkins are only 2 ply, so I'm taking them apart, but make sure you check your napkins because some can be 3 ply. And don't throw away those plies that you're peeling off. I love to save those to clean up messes, but they're also great to create your own DIY custom napkins. I have a full tutorial on how to make those. I'll list that down below in the description, or you can scan this QR code right here. Because my napkin is not a continuous pattern, I'm going to cut out one of these squares to turn into the rice paper. I also really love this lavender napkin, and I'm going to do the same and cut out one of these images from the napkin. Now to make DIY rice paper, you can use either school glue, clear school glue, or Mod Podge. All three work really great. For today, I'm going to show you how to use the school glue, and the ratios of each mixture is going to be the same. It doesn't matter what you're using. We're going to put in just enough to use on that napkin, just kind of eyeballing it for how much we're going to use to cover it. Once we have that in the little dish, I'm going to get some water, and we're going to add equal amounts of water to the school glue or the clear school glue or the Mod Podge, whatever you choose to use. Now this step is optional, but I love adding it. This is just some instant coffee, and I'm just adding a little tiny bit of it, and I find that it gives your rice paper that antique or that vintage feel. Try one napkin with the instant coffee and one without and see what you prefer. Keep stirring until all of that instant coffee has completely dissolved into the glue and water mixture. You want to be doing this on a surface where it's not going to stick to it. So I like using these baking sheets. They work excellent, and you can peel off the napkin once it's dry and they're not going to rip or tear. Place the napkin centered in the sheet, and then you're going to take your mixture and you're going to start just brushing it on, working from the inside out. This is going to help eliminate any of those big wrinkles or bubbles. They're going to come, they're going to be inevitable. You're not going to get rid of all of them, but working from the center out does help it lay a little bit more flat. Use light strokes. You don't want to press down too hard or you will tear the napkin. And just go around your whole napkin until it's completely soaked through with the glue mixture. We need it to soak right through the napkin so it goes onto that baking sheet. Now, if you don't have a baking sheet, you could also just use a sheet of plastic, or I've seen people use a cereal bag and take the plastic liner out of the box and use that. This is a page protector that I picked up at the dollar store and cut it open, and it works great for projects like this. And again, we're just going to start applying from the middle out until we've completely saturated that napkin. And are you ready? This is fabulous. This is sat for a couple hours. It's dried completely. We're peeling it off that plastic, and there is your DIY rice paper. That easy. It's see-through. You can fold it. You can crinkle it up. I love adding this into my junk journals. And here's the one on the baking sheet. Again, this one peeled off really easy. Now the side that is laying down is going to be glossy, and the side that's facing up is going to be matte. But these are flexible. These are great for durability. They're not going to rip now. So many possibilities. Now this was a napkin that was a continuous pattern, so I'm going to have a full sheet, and this daisy print is gorgeous. You can see my hand through on both sides. You can see how it's shiny on one side, matte on the other. Here's another napkin that I had that it was a continuous sheet. Of course, you can cut these into shapes. I was even thinking, wouldn't these be wonderful to cover a lampshade with? So many ideas swirling. You need to try this DIY because it's so simple. So before you head to the store and you buy some expensive rice paper, give this technique a try. As you can see, it is so easy. You can do it with Mod Podge, PVA glue, clear PVA glue. You can add some instant coffee to age it. It's fantastic, and it's great to do with kids too. You all have some fast food restaurant napkins stashed away somewhere. Grab a couple and try this technique. Now, I'm going to do 2 different ways of doing this to show you some comparisons. So make sure you stick through to the end because they both turn out beautiful. The first napkin I've pressed with an iron so it's nice and flat. It doesn't have any creases on it. And then I taped it onto a piece of computer paper. I'm going to directly print right on that napkin using my laser jet printer. You can try this technique using an inkjet, but you might find that your ink runs a little bit. It definitely works better with a laser jet printer. And I'm just going to trim off all around the edges and remove that napkin from that piece of paper, and we're ready to turn it into some faux rice paper. I've put down a piece of parchment paper. You want to put down something that glue is not going to stick to. Parchment paper, wax paper, or a plastic sleeve. And now we're ready to mix the solution together. I'm going to be using the clear Elmer's glue and some water, 1/8 of a cup of water and 1/4 cup of the clear glue. Now you can use regular school glue, but I like using the clear because when it dries, it gives a very translucent look. Now I want to make this piece of faux rice paper from the napkin look antique and old. So I'm just sprinkling in a little bit of instant coffee into that glue and water mixture, and we're just going to stir it really well until all of that coffee dissolves. Once it's dissolved, we're going to get that piece of parchment paper where I've marked the edges, and we're going to put that solution in between all of those marks. And you want to put on a liberal amount, spreading it around, trying to get it as even as you can within that square. We're now going to pick up that napkin and lay it right down into that glue solution. Now it's going to be wrinkly, it's going to have some bubbles, but that's what we want. We want it to have the character of rice paper, so we're just going to embrace that. Now I'm just going to take a little bit of that solution now and just dab it really gently on top of that napkin because it's going to rip really easy if you're too aggressive, and cover that whole napkin, and then just use my fingertip and spread it around all even.
I don't like my rice paper to have a straight edge, so I'm taking the edge of my scissors and just kind of pushing it up a little bit just to give it a little bit of a ragged edged look. And once we have that done, we're going to set it aside and let it dry completely. It has to be completely dry. You can leave it overnight, or you can put it in the sun and speed up the process a little bit, or you can even use a hair dryer. Let's do another napkin. We're going to do a little bit of a different technique on this one. I'm scrunching it up so it's nice and wrinkled. This faux rice paper is excellent to use for your junk journaling projects, for scrapbooking, and just to craft with. And it can get really pricey, so this is a great alternative to create your own and do it at a fraction of a cost. Now for this napkin, I'm not adding the coffee, so you can see the difference between adding the coffee and not. Again, spreading it all over that parchment paper, and we're going to lay that napkin right into it, embracing the wrinkles and the bubbles. And then we're just going to pat a little bit more of that glue solution on top of it, being really careful to not rip or tear the napkin. Also try these techniques out on white napkins, and if you want to have even a different color, you can experiment with, instead of coffee grinds, use some food coloring. Once I have that completely covered, again, I'm going to take my scissors and just go all around the edge so it doesn't look so straight and give it a nice ragged look. And this napkin is all ready to set aside and let it dry completely. I let my napkins sit overnight. It's now the next day, and you can see how they just peel right off of that parchment paper. So that's why it's important to use a parchment paper or a wax paper or a plastic sleeve so it comes off easy. And you just peel it off really carefully. And we have just taken a fast food restaurant napkin and turned it into a faux piece of rice paper. It's very pliable and it's not going to rip, and it is fantastic to add to any of your DIY projects. And this sheet of words is available in my Etsy store if you want to grab it and try this technique yourself. Now we're going to work on the other piece where we didn't have the coffee stain, and again, just peel it off really slowly, take your time, and another fantastic piece of rice paper, and see how translucent it is when you put your hand up against it. And when you put the white paper behind, you can see the starkness of the paper. So many possibilities to craft with. And here's what I did with the one piece of faux rice paper. I wrapped it around a glass jar I got out of my recycling bin. And when you put a candle in this, it just glows so beautiful. So if you want to try and make some faux rice paper, give this technique a try. Today I'm going to show you how you can make your own custom envelopes. This is so simple. Just takes a few supplies and you can make envelopes in a matter of minutes. I'm using a piece of scrapbooking paper that I cut into a square. You can make your square any size you like that's going to be perfect for your project. I am folding in the corners to meet in the middle, and then I'm taking my bone folder and I'm pressing it down so we get a nice crisp fold. Now I'm going to take my ruler and lay it across the top of that fold. And we're going to bring the bottom of the paper up to that ruler. And then we're going to get our bone folder again and go along the lines so they'll be nice and crisp. We are now going to take our ruler and go to those 2 points and then bend back that triangle and use my finger to make a little bit of an indent, because then we're going to fold it in and we have a nice crisp line. Now we're going to use our double-sided tape. And if you don't have any, you can also use glue. And I'm going to go right along that triangle, and then we're going to fold it in and press it down, make sure that it sticks really well. Now we're going to add the double-sided tape all along the outside too, on both sides, and then fold it up along that crease. Grab that ruler again and lay it at both points along the top, and then fold that triangle in creasing a line, and then fold it down into the middle using your bone folder to make a nice crisp line. Now this is optional, but I like using a corner punch. It just finishes off the envelope nice. I'll put a link below for all of these supplies that I'm using down in the description. Now I'm going to make an envelope so we can have print on the inside and the outside. I've taken 2 pieces of scrapbooking paper, cut them in a square, and used my glue stick to put them together. We're going to fold it into the middle, and we're going to do the same technique that we did on that first envelope. I find using the bone folder with this project makes a world of difference. It just makes nice clean lines, and then your envelope lays flat when you're all finished. We're now going to place the ruler along the top and then fold the bottom into the top of that ruler. We're now going to lay the ruler along that edge, put a crease in it, fold it in, and we're going to get out our double-sided tape. Applying our double-sided tape along that little triangle, folding it in, and then putting it along the sides. Using our bone folder so it's nice and crisp, and you can see we've created that pocket of our envelope. Now we're going to lay the ruler along the top, put a crease in that flap, fold it in, use our bone folder. That easy. We've made an envelope, and these are so beautiful because now we have a pattern on the inside and the outside. Now, if you want to use this to mail and you want to write an address on the outside, you can put the white on the outside and have the pattern on the inside. And that way, when you're mailing it, you will be able to see the address that you're writing on it. Now we've made an envelope that's perfect to put a card in or a little note and write an address, put a stamp on it, and mail it at the post office. And after you've put what you wanted in the envelope, you can use your double-sided tape and put it along the edge. You can use some glue stick, or you can put a sticker at the bottom of the flap. So many possibilities. I'm now going to make some smaller ones. These are perfect to add to your junk journaling, mixed media, scrapbooking, and you can use up all those little scrap pieces of paper that you have laying around in your craft room. So here are just a few of the envelopes that I've made with some scrapbooking paper. You can use regular computer paper, you can use packing paper, you can use gift wrap paper. So many possibilities. You can use a blank piece of paper. If your kids want to make envelopes, they can draw on them, you can stamp on them. Just get creative and try this technique out, and they can turn into envelopes in a matter of minutes. To start this project, I have a piece of coffee stained paper and I want 1 ply of a napkin. Now this napkin's 3 plies, so I've just taken off that back 1 ply and we're gonna set that aside. Now to make our glue for this project, you can use Mod Podge, you can use Elmer's clear glue, you can use the school glue. All will work fine. So I'm using my clear school glue and I'm doing a 2-to-1 ratio with water. We just want to water it down a little bit. Now you want to gather some little bits of string, seeds, dried flowers. I like using tea leaves or a little bit of herbs. I've got some basil here, or coffee grinds, or leaves from outside that you can crumble. Just use your imagination, and we're going to incorporate that into this paper. Make sure your glue and water mixture is incorporated really well together. Lay down that piece of paper on a sheet of parchment paper because we don't want it sticking to our table. I'm going to cover that whole piece of paper, making sure that I get right out to the edges. And then just get sprinkling your little bits of flour or your dried tea or coffee grinds. I've got some little pieces of thread that I had in my sewing kit that I cut up into small pieces, and I'm just laying them into that wet glue here and there. You want to make it look a little bit natural, so you don't want it all clumped up in one. Now these flowers, some of them I've gotten from my garden that I clipped and I dried and brought into the house. Some of them are from a bouquet that I got and I saved the flowers and dried them. I just have a little dish in one of my cabinets that I keep the dried flowers in for when I do a project like this. Now we're going to take that one ply of napkin and very carefully centering it on top of that paper, press it right into that wet glue and all the little bits that we sprinkled on the paper. And then take your glue solution with a paintbrush and paint right on top of that napkin another coat. And you want to go right out past the edge so you can seal it really well around the edges of that whole piece of paper. Cover the whole thing with a good amount. And like I said before, you can use school glue, you can use Mod Podge, you can use the clear school glue. All of this will work perfect for this project. Set it aside and let it dry completely. Once it's dry, take off that parchment paper. It'll peel right off of it. And then I like to take my scissors and trim right up to that piece of paper so it's nice and neat and tidy. Now this is just an option, but I have this corner cutter and I just love it. It rounds the corner and I just think it finishes off the paper really nicely. I'll put a link down below in the description for this cutter. So there is our faux piece of paper, and here's some other pieces that I've made. This is just on a piece of coffee dyed paper with just sprinkling different types of flowers and string and a little bit of tea and some herbs. Another coffee stain. Now this one I did on a piece of scrapbook paper. You can see the scrapbook paper show through. And then I had, instead of coffee dyeing it, I food color dyed it a little bit in a squirt bottle with some water and food coloring, and it gave that blue haze. This was one that I did on a printed sheet of one of my graphics and another piece of scrapbooking paper that I did this process on with the blue dye. Now I'm going to show you how I'm going to take one of these sheets of faux homemade paper I made and turn it into a beautiful journal. I had these coffee stained lined papers and we're going to use this as the outside cover for our journal. I'm going to fold our lined paper in half, making sure that it's even right across from the top to the bottom. Press it down really firmly and you're going to see the inside sheets stick out a little bit. So I'm going to put it on a cutting board and we're going to cut that so it's all even. Just using my little clips to hold everything in place, taking my ruler, and I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and trim everything up nice and even. It's handy doing this on a cutting board because you can line up your lines and make sure you're cutting a nice straight edge. I've got my inside of my journal already. I'm just going to measure it because I want to make my faux homemade paper a little tiny bit bigger than the lined sheets. So I'm just going to measure them out and then I'm going to cut it with my cutter and fold it in half so it fits around those lined sheets. Now I've got some embroidery floss and I'm just going to measure out 3 times the length of the journal. Cut it off and then we're going to place it inside and measure 3 holes on the inside of our journal. I'm going to find the middle of it and use my pencil and mark that, and then I'm going to go 1 inch in from either end and make a little dot there. That's going to give us our guide for when we sew our journal all together. This is really simple. Don't be intimidated. I've got a little screwdriver and I'm just punching a hole right where I made those 3 holes in the middle of the journal so we can see where we need to sew it through the back. I'm going to take my darning needle and I'm going to go through that center hole, leaving a little bit of a tail. Come up through the top, pull the string through, go in through the bottom, pull the string through, making sure we're not pulling on that tail, leaving it, and then come up through the middle. And then we're going to tie a double knot, making sure that we're tying that string into the knot. We're then going to trim off the extra and fold it up and making sure that it's nice and tight and all put together. I have this little clip that I cut out of a piece of scrapbooking paper. I thought it looked really nice with this homemade faux paper, and I'm just gluing it onto the front. I had some little bits of paper left over, so I'm going to actually turn this into a bookmark. I've got another piece of scrapbook paper. I'm going to glue it down on the back side of that faux homemade paper, making sure that it's bonded really well. I also wanted to round the corners of this little booklet once I had it made, so I got out that corner punch again and just finishes it off and makes it look really nice. And my homemade journal is all finished. I added a brad in the top and one of my homemade tassels. It's gonna look perfect inside this little journal, and this is gonna make a perfect Christmas gift.
Have you ever been frustrated with store-bought stencil pastes that are expensive, limited in color, or just not the right consistency for your project? I have a DIY stencil paste recipe that's easy to make, completely customizable, and uses readily available ingredients. Stencil paste is a thick, spreadable medium that allows you to apply paint through a stencil design onto various surfaces. It creates crisp, clean lines for stunning effects on everything from cards, gift tags, furniture, and wall art. It is 1 part acrylic paint. This is where the magic happens. Choose any color you like to create a stunning customized design. To 1 part baking soda. This acts as our base, providing structure and a slightly abrasive texture for clean stenciling. Now you want to incorporate those 2 ingredients together really well. The beauty of this recipe is its versatility. Depending on your project, you can adjust the consistency of the paste. Thicker paste or more of a raised stencil, add more baking soda. If you want a runnier paste, then you can just add more acrylic paint. However, be careful not to thin it out too much or it might bleed underneath the stencil. For today's demonstration, I'm going to make it a little bit thicker, so I've added a bit more baking soda. I also love this recipe because it's not only easy, but it's also kind on the environment. You're using baking soda instead of pre-made paste, making it a sustainable option for eco-conscious crafters like you. Plus, the common and household ingredients make it super accessible for everyone. You can customize the color also by adding texture with sand or glitter and adjust the thickness to suit any project. Now, one trick when you're doing this technique with the stencil paste is to apply a little bit of spray adhesive to the back of your stencil. It's going to make it stick to your project and eliminate a lot of bleeding underneath when you apply that stencil paste. Also, don't have any stencils? I have a DIY video on how to create your own stencils. I'll put that link down below in the description. I'm making a greeting card, so I'm going to press that stencil down firmly that has a spray adhesive on the back, making sure it's smooth and it has good contact with the paper. When spreading your stencil paste, I find that a palette knife works really well, but if you don't have one, you can always use a paintbrush also. Smooth out that paste until it completely covers that stencil, and you can leave it thick or thin. This is where you can just play with it and adjust it to your project. Stencil paste can be used on a variety of surfaces, including paper, cardstock, fabric, wood, canvas, metal. Just play around with it. Once you have it covered, you want to gently peel away that stencil. And how beautiful is this? And you've created a raised surface with that stencil paste. Once you've finished this step, you want to set it aside and let it dry completely. If you have any left over, store it in an airtight container in the refrigerator, and it should last for a few days. And when you're ready to use it again, simply take it out and let it come to room temperature. And when you're ready to clean up, it's a breeze. Just use some warm soapy water and rinse your tools thoroughly. On this piece of junk journal paper, I applied it very thick, and it's a nice raised stencil. This is just a DIY tag that I made, an old envelope that I saved out of my junk mail that I applied that stencil paste on, and of course our greeting card. So if you have a chance, try this recipe out and give it a go on some of your DIY projects. This video is all about transferring photos from magazines onto your DIY projects. Today I'm going to show you how you can do it onto watercolor paper, but this can also be done on wood, on canvas, on glass, so many possibilities. Today I'm going to be using this National Geographic to pick out a photo that I like. One thing that you have to consider is if you're picking out a photo that has words on it, when you're doing the transfer, the words are going to be backwards. This one doesn't have any words, so we're good to go, and we're going to transfer this onto a piece of watercolor paper. If you love doing mixed media, junk journaling, scrapbooking, making your own greeting cards, this is a really fun technique. If you want to do this technique to wood or glass or canvas, it works best if you paint your surface with some chalk paint first. Chalk paint allows your transfer to stick better than just being on a surface that doesn't have that coating. With the watercolor paper, the Mod Podge is able to soak into it, and you can do a transfer without putting chalk paint on top of it. With that being said, you can also paint your watercolor paper with a little bit of gesso, and that will allow a really good transfer too, but it's not needed. So today we're just taking our paper that I took out of the National Geographic. I ripped it around the edges because I want it to be that distressed look, and I'm putting on a pretty good coat of Mod Podge matte. You want to apply enough so it's going to soak into the paper, but it's also going to soak into the watercolor paper. Once I have it completely covered, I'm going to place it where I want it on that piece of watercolor paper and then press it down really firmly, getting out all of the bubbles and wrinkles. That's a really important step because if you don't get the bubbles and wrinkles out, it's not going to transfer in those spots. And to really ensure that I get those out, I love using my brayer and just pressing really hard and getting it nice and smooth. To give you some inspiration, if you have comic books, if you have a page out of a book, if you have some sewing patterns, if you have coloring books, all of these can be transferred using this method. I've let this sit for a few hours. You want it to dry really well. And then I just have a little dish of water and a little rag, and I'm just rubbing that water into that magazine page until it soaks through. Now I do find the National Geographic pages are quite thick, and it takes a lot of water to soften it up to be able to rub it off, where a lot of the other magazines aren't quite as difficult. So if you're just starting, I would start with a cheaper magazine. But this is going to work fine today for me to show you the process. And then we're going to start rubbing away the paper. I like to work in the middle and work outwards, and you can feel the paper start to roll up underneath your fingers, and as you do, you're going to see that image underneath start to peek through. Now, one trick is to try to keep the water just on your magazine page. If you're spilling the water over onto the paper, you're going to have a bit of a mess. So try to contain the water just on the magazine page. And once you get going, as you can see here, you can start to peel off some bigger pieces of paper, making it easier to rub off. So if you don't have an inkjet printer or a laser printer, this is a really great transfer method to test because you don't need any of those things. You can just grab a magazine, put some Mod Podge on, put it on your project, let it sit and dry, and then rub off the paper. It takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice, and it's never a perfect transfer. You're always going to have little bits and pieces that are going to rub off here and there, but I think it gives it character. Also remember, slow and steady wins the race, and that's going to ensure you're going to have a really beautiful transfer. Now we've got that first thick layer of paper off, it's time to take off that cloudy haze. And this just takes a little bit of time. I just use my fingertips, I just dip it in the water and work in small areas, going around in a circle, and you'll find the paper will roll up underneath your finger. This is where you don't want to rub too hard or you're going to rub that magazine page off. Go in small little spots, dip your finger, take your time, have a coffee, have a tea. Crafting is all about relaxing and having fun doing it. It's not a race, and if you try to do this having a race, you're not going to have a really good outcome. Just take your time. Now, I've got as much paper off as I can without ruining the magazine page underneath. And here's where the magic comes in, because you can now put a top coat on that and it's going to make that cloudy residue disappear. So you can use Mod Podge as a top coat. You can also use water-based polyacrylic sealer as a top coat. Both work fantastic and it will seal it up and get rid of that cloudy film. Once the Mod Podge was completely dry, I ripped around the edges of that image, and how cute is this? It's a great way to transfer a magazine page onto your DIY projects. I'm going to show you how to use grommets. What are grommets and how can they be incorporated into our DIY projects? Grommets are metal rings that you see on bags or tarps or clothing and crafts, and they reinforce holes, prevent tearing, and add a polished look to your DIYs. I bought this kit on Amazon and I'm going to show you how to use it properly. You don't need any fancy tools. All you need is this kit and it's really affordable. A grommet consists of two pieces, the top flange and the bottom ring. And in this kit, you're going to get a hole punch, a setter tool to set the grommet, and an anvil. I've made a bookmark and we're going to put a grommet in the top of it. I've placed a piece of wood underneath to protect our table as we need to punch a hole through our piece of paper. Then I'll set it exactly where I want it and use my hammer. You only have to tap it a couple times and you're going to create a hole in the top of your project where you're going to be able to fit in your grommet. Sometimes there's a bit of confusion between a grommet and an eyelet. A grommet consists of two pieces where an eyelet is a single piece. For an eyelet, you need to have a special pair of pliers to apply them, but with these grommets, all you're going to need is this kit. Now that we've cut the hole, it's going to fit easily into the hole that we punched in the bookmark. This kit also comes in different sizes, so you'll have to decide what size you want for the projects you're going to do. Next, we're going to put the flange in the paper and then set it on the anvil with the flange on the bottom. Then take the flatter piece of the grommet and set it on top, making sure that it's all lined up really well. This special tool has an indent in the end. Place it over the anvil and gently hammer. While hammering, I like to swirl it just a bit to ensure that the flange is bent all the way around the grommet. Grommets are handy to use in your crafting, whether to strengthen or just to decorate your projects. Whether it's making bags, clothes, curtains, scrapbooks, books, or leather items, grommets are super helpful. And that's how easy it is to add a grommet to your DIY projects. It looks polished, clean, and neat, and it also adds strength to our bookmark if we want to put some ribbon in the top. And if you're a reseller, it always just finishes off your projects nicely. These are a must-have addition to your craft room supplies. I always find myself digging into them and adding them, especially to my junk journal projects. I'm also going to show you how you can add a grommet into fabric, and it's really simple. There's only one little different step. Sometimes it can be difficult to get that hole punch to cut through fabric. So what I like to do is take a really sharp pair of scissors, small ones, and just very carefully nip a little hole in that fabric that's just a little bit smaller than that grommet flange. I always recommend, if you've never tried this product before, to test it on different samples of paper and fabric to see how it works before adding it to a project, just in case you don't want to wreck the project that you're working on. Once you have that little hole cut, you're going to push that flange of the grommet through the hole we created, making sure it's pushed through all the way. And then we're going to set it on the anvil and place the second piece of the grommet just like we did with the paper. Use the tool with the indent in it and hammer gently to push our grommet together. And that's how easy it is to put a grommet into a piece of fabric. This is a fun little toolkit that you can use in your DIY projects, and I'll put the link down below in the description if you want to check it out and don't already have some in your craft room. Habit of collecting every scrap paper that comes my way. Over time, I accumulate enough scraps to either make homemade paper or embark on a new project. This time, I decided to use my collection of paper scraps to create something beautiful and useful. By repurposing these scraps, I've not only prevented them from ending up in the garbage, but I've also gave them a new purpose. After tearing up all of my scrap paper into small pieces, I pour boiling water over them to break down the paper fibers and make it easier to create flower paper. I let the mixture sit overnight, allowing the water to fully soak and break down that paper. This ensures that the final product is going to be able to hold well together. It's now the following day, and I have a trusty blender that I found at Value Village in my craft room. I use it exclusively only for my crafting projects. After placing some of the soaked paper into the blender, I add enough water to ensure that the mixture is going to blend really well. Then I blend everything together until it reaches a smooth pulp consistency. It's important to ensure that there are no lumps or pieces of paper left after blending, and that it's perfectly smooth. Once the paper has been blended to a smooth pulp, it's important to strain out as much water as possible. To do this, I place the pulp in a strainer and set a bowl underneath to collect all the extra water. I'm going to continue blending until all the paper has been transformed into a pulp, adding necessary water along the way to ensure that it's going to blend properly. Now that I've blended all of the paper into a pulp and poured it into a strainer, it's time to start removing as much water as possible. I'm carefully squeezing that pulp and letting the water drain into the bowl underneath, emptying it as necessary. This is a really important step. We want to get as much water taken out of that pulp as we can. If you're finding this crafting project to be enjoyable, I would greatly appreciate your support by taking a moment to hit the like button. Your support goes a long way in helping me continue to create content like this, and I'm really grateful for all of your support. After squeezing as much water out of the pulp as possible, I take my hands and give it a final squeeze over the strainer to remove any remaining water. At this point, the pulp should be crumbly and fall apart easily. This is a good indication that the excess water has been removed and the pulp is ready to go on to the next step. Last summer, as the flower season drew to a close, I collected and dried a variety of petals and flowers to use in DIY projects during the winter. Today I'm taking a handful of these dried petals and flowers and I'm going to crumble them up and gently spread them over the top of that pulp mixture. Adding the dried petals and flowers will make the flower paper look nicer and more colorful. It's an easy way to make that finished product more interesting and beautiful. Next, I'm adding some seeds to the mixture. I got these seeds from the hardware store and I'm just sprinkling them on top of the pulp. It's hard to say how much to add, so I'm just doing it by eye, trying to distribute them evenly. Once I have them sprinkled on, I'm ready to mix everything together. Now it's time to shape the paper mixture. The easiest shape to make are small balls or circles. Simply mold the mixture in your hands until it looks smooth and neat. This is a wonderful activity to do with kids. It allows them to create their own unique shapes while also teaching them about sustainable crafting and the value of repurposing materials for gift giving. Using cookie cutters is a fun way to create shapes. I found a flower-shaped cutter that works well. You don't want a cutter that's too intricate because it can be difficult to remove that paper mixture, but press the paper firmly into the cutter and then carefully remove it. Place that shape on a sheet of wax paper and let it dry. I think these would make excellent Mother's Day gifts or birthday gifts. Simply place them in a jar with a lid and add a nice ribbon and a tag, or as you'll see later in the video, try the idea I have, which I think you're really going to enjoy. If you're running out of time and need some last-minute gift ideas, this could be the perfect solution. This cookie cutter has more detailed edges, which made it more difficult to remove the paper. So just experiment with different things that you have around your home that you could turn into shapes with this paper and have fun with it. I've got all of my pulp shaped the way that I want them, and I place them on a sheet of wax paper to dry overnight. Just remember, thicker ones will take longer to dry, so keep them thin if you're in a rush. I really love the little dried flowers and petals that I added to these. As I wait for the seed paper to dry, I'm trying to think of how I can make them look even more special as a gift. I decided to repurpose a clothing tag that I'd saved and turn it into a really beautiful gift tag. To create the tag, I printed out the graphic and carefully sealed it with some Mod Podge to ensure the ink is going to stay put. Once it dries, I'm going to cut out the graphic and attach it to the front of the tag using another layer of Mod Podge. This is not only going to protect the graphic, but it's also going to give it some texture and finish to the tag. And don't worry, if you like this graphic and you want to use it on your own projects, it is available in my Etsy store and it's downloadable and printable, and you can do this project yourself at home. With my gift tag all done, I'm now ready to pull this all together, and I'm going to use one of my homemade beeswax wraps to create a simple envelope. I'll place in a couple of those seed flowers, and then I'm going to seal up that envelope, and that's it. This is a perfect gift that's both thoughtful and eco-friendly. If you're curious about how I made beeswax wraps, check out the easy video tutorial that I'll link below. And that is a wrap. Over 25 paper crafting ideas that you can make at home for almost nothing. I really hope this video has given you a whole list of things to try and that your craft room is calling your name right now. If you love these kind of projects, making beautiful things from simple supplies that you already have, I think you're absolutely gonna love our Upcycled Society. It's my membership community where I have a huge library full of digital printouts, DIY recipe booklets, exclusive videos, a private Facebook group, and so much more, all for less than a good cup of coffee a month. Everything in one place, ready for you whenever inspiration strikes. The link to join is right down below in the description, and I would love for you to check it out. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe so you don't miss what's going on next, because I have a lot more ideas just like these on the way. We're gonna see you in the next one.